Welcome, weary wanderer, to a journey through one of Hyrule's greatest mysteries. Tonight, we'll explore the enigmatic Zonai tribe, whose ancient ruins dot the landscape of Breath of the Wild like whispers from a forgotten age. This is a tale of lost civilizations and enduring puzzles, of dragon statues and spiral symbols, of theories that span across timelines and connect distant games through threads of possibility. So, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we wander together through the mists of speculation and wonder. There's no rush here, no need to solve every mystery. Just let these ancient stories wash over you like morning fog through Ferren woods. In the year 2014, when the world first caught a glimpse of what would become The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, few could have imagined that a single frame from that early trailer would spark one of the most enduring mysteries in the entire series. Link fled through ancient ruins as a guardian pursued him with mechanical determination, its red laser cutting through the twilight air like a blade of pure malice. Yet it was not the hero or his pursuer that would capture the imagination of scholars and theorists in the years to come, but rather the silent stone witnesses that flanked this desperate chase. In the foreground and background of that fateful scene stood statues unlike anything previously seen in the Kingdom of Hyrule, their forms carved with a precision and artistry that spoke of a civilization both ancient and sophisticated. An owl spread its wings in eternal vigilance, while nearby, a dragon coiled its serpentine form in poses that suggested both wisdom and terrible power. These were not mere decorations or random architectural elements, but the deliberate creations of minds that understood symbolism and sacred geometry in ways that would only become clear much later. When Breath of the Wild finally emerged into the world, players who ventured beyond the Great Plateau discovered that these mysterious statues were not isolated curiosities but part of a vast network of ruins scattered across the length and breadth of Hyrule like pieces of an enormous puzzle, waiting to be solved. The greatest concentration of these structures lay in the dense jungles of Faerun, where ancient stones emerged from the green shadows like teeth in some primordial jaw, their surfaces carved with symbols that no living soul could interpret. It was here, in a clearing where shafts of golden sunlight pierced the jungle canopy to illuminate moss-covered stones and crumbling platforms, that explorers discovered the location that would give this mystery its name. The Zonai ruins, as the ancient site came to be known, represented the heart of whatever civilization had created these scattered monuments. Yet for all its obvious importance, for all the care and skill evident in every carved surface and carefully placed stone, this place existed in a state of profound silence that seemed to swallow questions whole. The ruins themselves told a story written in a language of stone and symbol, where three recurring motifs appeared again and again, with the persistence of an ancient prayer. The dragon appeared most frequently, its serpentine form twisted into configurations that suggested both the fluid grace of water and the terrible power of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. These were not the realistic depictions of living creatures, but something more archetypal, as if the sculptors had sought to capture not the physical form of dragons, but their essential spiritual significance. The owl appeared with almost equal frequency, though its representations carried a different quality altogether. Where the dragons seemed to embody raw power and elemental force, the owls radiated a sense of watchful intelligence, their great eyes carved with such skill that they seemed to follow observers as they moved through the ruins. These were clearly creatures of wisdom and knowledge, guardians perhaps of secrets that had been old when the stones themselves were young. Most mysterious of all were the boar statues, which appeared far less frequently than their draconic and avian companions, and seemed to suffer from a peculiar form of neglect that set them apart from the other carvings. Where dragons and owls stood proud and intact, despite the passage of countless centuries, the boar figures were often partially buried, their forms obscured by earth and vegetation, as if the very ground sought to reclaim them. This curious disparity would prove to be one of the most intriguing aspects of the entire mystery, suggesting stories within stories and secrets that had been deliberately hidden even from those who built these monuments. As explorers ventured beyond the central ruins to map the full extent of this lost civilization's reach, they discovered that Zonai architecture followed certain unmistakable patterns that marked it as distinct from any other building tradition found in Hyrule. The spiral motif appeared everywhere, carved into pillars and platforms with such consistency that it clearly held deep significance for whoever created these works. Unlike the simple spirals found in other cultures, these were complex forms that incorporated small ticks or marks at their termini, creating symbols that seemed to pulse with meaning even when their specific significance remained opaque. The pillars themselves represented another architectural signature of this vanished people, their surfaces covered with intertwining serpent patterns that seemed to writhe and move in the shifting light that filtered through the jungle canopy. Some rose to tremendous heights, their tops lost in the green shadows above, while others had fallen and lay broken among the roots and undergrowth like the bones of some vast primordial creature. The craftsmanship, evident in even the smallest details, spoke of artisans who had devoted lifetimes to perfecting their skills and understanding their materials. Yet perhaps the most remarkable discovery was the revelation that these ruins existed in a state of profound integration with the landscape around them, as if their builders had sought not to impose their will upon the natural world, but to work in harmony with forces far older than any human civilization. Springs bubbled up through carefully carved channels that directed their flow along paths that seemed both random and purposeful, while massive trees grew through gaps that appeared to have been deliberately left for their accommodation. This was architecture that breathed with the rhythms of the forest itself, creation that honored the sacred relationship between the built and the natural worlds. The most spectacular example of this integration was found at the Spring of Courage, where a dragon's head of truly colossal proportions emerged from the living rock itself. Its jaws opened wide, as if to swallow the sacred waters that flowed from the earth's depths. The craftsmanship here transcended mere sculpture to become something approaching the divine, where every scale and tooth had been carved with such attention to detail that the great head seemed ready to lift itself from the stone and speak the secrets of ages past. Behind this magnificent dragon guardian, carved directly into the cliff face with the subtlety of master artisans, ran a design that would prove to be one of the most significant discoveries in the entire complex. Two serpents intertwined in an eternal dance, their bodies flowing together in patterns that suggested both the double helix of life itself and the endless cycle of time that carries all civilizations from birth through glory to inevitable decay. This twinning serpent motif would prove to be far more than a decorative element, appearing in various forms throughout not only the Zonai ruins but in architectural traditions scattered across multiple games in the series. As scholars attempted to catalogue and understand the full extent of Zonai influence on the landscape of Hyrule, they discovered ruins in locations far from the jungle heartland that bore the unmistakable signatures of the same building tradition. Thunder Plateau, with its elevated platforms and commanding views, seemed designed as an observatory where ancient astronomers might have tracked the movements of stars and planets across the vast dome of the night sky. Typhlo ruins presented a different mystery altogether, shrouded in perpetual darkness that no natural phenomenon could explain, and dotted with torch-like structures that seemed designed to guide travelers through the eternal night. Most intriguing of all were the three great labyrinths scattered across Hyrule's diverse regions, massive constructions that dwarfed even the most ambitious ruins found elsewhere. The Lomé labyrinths, as they came to be known, incorporated dragon heads and serpent motifs that clearly connected them to the Zonai tradition. Yet their construction seems somehow different from the organic integration found at sites like the Spring of Courage. These mazes had a manufactured quality that spoke of different priorities and perhaps different builders altogether, though whether they represented evolution in Zonai building techniques or the work of later imitators remained a subject of intense debate. Within these labyrinths lay treasures that provided the first concrete clues about the nature of the civilization that had created them. The barbarian armor, as it came to be known, bore descriptions that spoke of a warlike tribe whose very clothing was designed to swell the fighting spirit of those who wore it. The markings etched into these ancient garments resembled war paint, suggesting a people for whom combat was not merely a necessity but a sacred calling that defined their relationship with the world around them. The Japanese designation for this equipment proved even more revealing, referring to it as the savage tribe's clothing, with a directness that left little doubt about how this lost civilization saw itself and was seen by others. These were not peaceful agriculturalists or contemplative philosophers, but warriors whose very identity was forged in the crucible of battle and whose cultural expressions reflected a worldview where strength and courage were the highest virtues. Yet even as these discoveries began to paint a picture of who the Zonai might have been, the most frustrating aspect of the entire mystery remained their complete absence from all recorded history. In a kingdom where the deeds of heroes were remembered in song and stone, where ancient battles were commemorated on tapestries that had survived for 10,000 years, where even the most minor historical events found their way into legends passed down through generations, the Zonai existed in a bubble of perfect silence. Impa, the ancient Sheikah whose memory stretched back across centuries and who served as the kingdom's unofficial keeper of historical knowledge, told the tale of the great calamity that had befallen Hyrule 10 millennia past without a single reference to the tribe whose ruins dominated entire regions of the landscape. The great tapestry in her house, that masterwork of historical documentation that depicted the ancient battle between the forces of light and the servants of darkness, showed guardians and divine beasts, heroes and princesses, but nowhere could be found even the slightest hint of the civilization that had carved dragon heads into mountainsides and built platforms that touched the clouds. This silence was so complete and so deliberate that it began to take on significance of its own, suggesting not mere forgetfulness or the natural decay of memory across vast periods of time, but active suppression of knowledge that someone or something had deemed too dangerous to preserve. The very thoroughness of this historical erasure spoke of systematic effort, of decisions made at the highest levels of power to ensure that future generations would never learn what had become of the people whose architectural legacy remained so obviously embedded in the landscape around them. The revelation that the name Zonai itself represented an anagram of the word Nazo, meaning mystery in the ancient tongue, seemed almost too perfect to be coincidence. Here was a civilization that had named itself after the very quality that would define their legacy, as if they had somehow foreseen that their fate would be to exist forever at the margins of understanding, tantalizingly present, yet perpetually beyond the reach of definitive knowledge. As the scope of this mystery became clear, as explorers mapped ruin after ruin and discovered symbol after symbol that pointed toward a lost civilization of tremendous sophistication and obvious importance, the questions multiplied faster than any answers could be found. Who were these people who had commanded such advanced architectural techniques and possessed such deep understanding of sacred symbolism? What had driven them to carve their stories in stone across the length and breadth of Hyrule? And perhaps most haunting of all, What had happened to them that their complete disappearance could be so thoroughly erased from the historical record that not even legends remained to mark their passing? The stage was set for one of the most complex and enduring mysteries in the entire history of Hyrule, a puzzle that would draw researchers and theorists into debates that spanned multiple games and reached across timelines to touch the very foundations of the world's creation. In the silence of the ruins, in the patient gaze of stone dragons and the watchful eyes of carved owls, lay secrets that would challenge everything. Scholars thought they knew about the kingdom's past, and forced them to confront the possibility that the history they had taken for granted was nothing more than the carefully edited version that someone had chosen to preserve. The mystery of the Zonai had begun, and like the spiral symbols they had carved into so many surfaces, it would prove to be a path that led ever inward toward truths that became more complex and more profound. The deeper one dared to venture into the shadows of forgotten time. Among all the architectural wonders scattered across the breadth of Hyrule, none present as complex a puzzle as the three massive structures known as the Lome Labyrinths, whose very existence challenges our understanding of Zonai craftsmanship and raises profound questions about the relationship between authentic, ancient construction and later imitation. These colossal mazes, each one large enough to swallow entire villages within their twisting corridors, stand as monuments to ambition on a scale that dwarfs even the most impressive ruins found elsewhere in the kingdom. The North Lome Labyrinth rises from the frozen wastes of Hebra like a geometric mountain, its walls carved from stone that seems to drink in the pale northern light and hold it prisoner within crystalline depths. The South Lome Labyrinth sprawls across the burning sands of the Gerudo Desert, its passages creating pools of blessed shadow where travelers might find momentary refuge from the merciless Sunday. The Central Lome Labyrinth dominates a portion of the Hyrule Ridge region, its presence so commanding that it seems to bend the very landscape around it into submission. Each of these structures incorporates design elements that clearly connect them to the Zonai architectural tradition, yet scholars who have studied them extensively report subtle but significant differences that distinguish them from the organic integration found at sites like the Zonai ruins proper. The dragon heads carved into the labyrinth walls possess the same essential proportions and symbolic significance as those found elsewhere, but their execution carries a quality that some describe as manufactured rather than inspired, as if the sculptors were following templates rather than channeling the creative fire that had produced the original masterpieces. The serpent patterns that wind their way along the maze walls display a similar peculiarity, incorporating the same double snake motifs found throughout Zonai architecture, but rendered with a precision that borders on the mechanical. Where the patterns at sites like the Spring of Courage seem to flow with the natural rhythms of living creatures, the labyrinth decorations possess an almost mathematical regularity that suggests a different hand, and perhaps a different heart behind their creation. Most telling of all are the spiral symbols that appear throughout all three mazes, which incorporate a design that differs in one crucial detail from those found at undisputed Zonai sites. The ancient spirals carved into pillars and platforms throughout Faron Woods and other confirmed Zonai locations invariably terminate in small tick marks that seem to give them direction and purpose, as if they represent not merely decorative elements but functional symbols with specific meanings. The labyrinth spirals, by contrast, end in smooth curves that lack these distinctive markers, creating patterns that are aesthetically pleasing but somehow spiritually incomplete. The snake patterns themselves present another fascinating anomaly, appearing throughout the labyrinths in configurations that seem to violate the careful symbolic logic found elsewhere in Zonai architecture. In several locations, these serpentine designs are inexplicably inverted, their heads pointing downward rather than up, their bodies twisted in ways that suggest distress rather than the fluid grace characteristic of authentic Zonai work. Whether this represents deliberate modification for unknown purposes, or simply the errors of craftsmen working from incomplete understanding, remains a subject of intense scholarly debate. The scale of the Lomé labyrinths represents perhaps the most compelling argument for their status as later constructions rather than authentic Zonai works. These structures are massive, beyond anything else associated with the ancient tribe, their walls stretching toward the sky with an ambition that seems almost hubris when compared to the humble integration with natural landscapes that characterizes confirmed Zonai sites. Where authentic Zonai architecture seems to grow from the earth like living things, the labyrinths impose themselves upon the landscape with a geometric brutality that speaks of different values and different priorities. The interior design of these mazes reinforces this impression of manufactured rather than organic creation, with passages that follow rigid mathematical principles rather than the flowing, intuitive layouts found in genuine Zonai construction. The corridors branch and intersect according to patterns that can be mapped and predicted, their walls meeting at precise angles that create acoustic effects clearly intended to disorient and confuse visitors. This is architecture designed as challenge rather than sanctuary, construction intended to test rather than nurture the human spirit. Yet, for all their apparent artificiality, the Lomé labyrinths serve as repositories for some of the most significant artifacts connected to Zonai culture, housing within their depths the complete set of barbarian armor that provides our most direct link to understanding the warrior tradition of this lost civilization. The armor itself, with its savage markings and power-enhancing properties, seems to bridge the gap between the spiritual symbolism of Zonai architecture and the brutal practicalities of their warlike culture. The descriptions attached to these ancient garments speak of markings designed to swell the fighting spirit, decorations that functioned not merely as ornamentation but as psychological tools intended to transform their wearers into instruments of battle. The war paint patterns etched into the metal and leather carry an intensity that radiates even from static display, suggesting artisans who understood the deep connections between visual symbolism and emotional state, between the external decoration of the body and the internal preparation of the spirit for combat. The Japanese terminology for this equipment, referring to it explicitly as the clothing of the savage tribe, removes any ambiguity about how these people saw themselves and were perceived by others. This was not the regalia of peaceful philosophers or contemplative mystics, but the battle dress of warriors who had made conflict the central organizing principle of their entire civilization. Every piece of the armor, from helmet to boots, carries design elements that reinforce themes of aggression, dominance, and the raw exercise of power over both enemies and environment. The question of who actually constructed the Lomé labyrinths becomes even more complex when we consider their relationship to the Sheikah shrine network that has played such a crucial role in the hero's journey across modern Hyrule. Each labyrinth houses within its depths a shrine that follows the standard design principles of Sheikah construction, complete with the characteristic blue lighting and geometric puzzle chambers that mark all such installations. Yet these shrines seem perfectly integrated into the labyrinth design, as if both maze and shrine were conceived as unified projects rather than separate constructions that were later combined. This integration suggests a level of cooperation between the builders of the labyrinths and the creators of the shrine network that would have required sophisticated planning and coordination across what must have been an enormous span of time. The Sheikah shrines represent technology that dates back 10,000 years to the era of the first Great Calamity, yet the labyrinths incorporate architectural elements that clearly reference Zonai traditions, whose true age remains unknown. The successful marriage of these two building traditions within single structures implies either remarkable preservation of ancient knowledge or active collaboration between civilizations separated by vast gulfs of time. The physical condition of the labyrinths provides another clue to their true nature and origins, as these structures have weathered the passage of time remarkably well compared to authentic Zonai ruins scattered throughout the kingdom. Where dragon statues and owl carvings at confirmed Zonai sites show clear signs of erosion, weathering, and the patient work of natural forces slowly reclaiming worked stone, the labyrinth walls maintain their sharp edges and precise angles with an integrity that suggests either much more recent construction or building techniques far superior to those employed elsewhere. This exceptional preservation becomes even more remarkable when we consider the harsh environments in which two of the three labyrinths are located. The North Lome Labyrinth endures the brutal freeze-thaw cycles of Hebra's eternal winter, conditions that should crack and shatter stone with relentless efficiency. The South Lome Labyrinth bakes under the desert sun and weathers fierce sandstorms that scour everything in their path down to bare rock. Yet both structures maintain their architectural integrity with a stubbornness that defies natural explanation. The theory that these labyrinths represent Sheikah recreations of Zonai architectural styles, built as elaborate shrine quests that would challenge the destined hero while preserving cultural memory of the lost civilization, gains credibility when we examine the purposeful nature of their construction. Unlike authentic Zonai sites, which seem to have served multiple functions as religious centers, astronomical observatories, and community gathering places, the labyrinths exist solely as challenges to be overcome, puzzles designed to test specific qualities of character and capability. Each labyrinth demands different virtues from those who would navigate its passages and claim its treasures. The North Lome Labyrinth tests endurance and persistence, its icy corridors requiring travelers to maintain their determination despite cold that numbs both body and spirit. The South Lome Labyrinth challenges resilience and resource management, forcing visitors to carefully husband their strength while navigating passages where every step costs precious energy. The Central Lome Labyrinth demands pure problem-solving ability, its layout comprising a three-dimensional puzzle that can only be solved through careful observation and logical deduction. This systematic approach to character testing aligns perfectly with Sheikah philosophy as we understand it from their shrine network, where each trial focuses on developing specific aspects of the heroic spirit that will prove necessary in the ultimate confrontation with darkness. The labyrinths function as macro shrines, challenges on a scale that requires not minutes or hours, but entire days to complete, ordeals that push the hero beyond normal limits and into the realm of legendary capability. The barbarian armor housed within these structures serves as both reward and revelation, providing tangible proof of Zonai culture while simultaneously enhancing the wearer's combat capabilities in ways that suggest deep understanding of the connection between psychological state and physical performance. The markings on the armor function as more than mere decoration, creating visual patterns that interact with the warrior's consciousness to unlock reserves of strength and aggression that might otherwise remain dormant. This psychological enhancement represents a sophisticated understanding of human nature that aligns with advanced Sheikah knowledge of mental and spiritual techniques. The Shadow Folk have always excelled at practices that bridge the gap between physical and metaphysical reality, using meditation, focused intention, and symbolic representation to achieve effects that seem magical to those who do not understand the underlying principles. The barbarian armor suggests that either the Zonai possessed similar knowledge, or that the Sheikah were able to reverse engineer and replicate the psychological techniques embedded in authentic Zonai artifacts. The integration of water features throughout several of these structures, adds another layer of complexity to questions of their origin and purpose. Authentic Zonai sites consistently incorporate flowing water as both practical and spiritual element, with springs and streams channeled through carefully carved conduits that serve both functional and ceremonial purposes. The labyrinths include similar water management systems, but implemented with engineering precision that speaks of mathematical calculation rather than intuitive harmony with natural forces. The Spring of Courage represents the pinnacle of authentic Zonai water architecture, where the massive dragon head seems to emerge from the living rock, as if the earth itself had chosen to take draconic form and offer its blessing to the sacred waters that flow from hidden depths. The craftsmanship here transcends mere construction to become something approaching divine inspiration, where every scale and tooth conveys meaning that operates below the level of conscious understanding, but resonates with something fundamental in the human spirit. The carved dragon exhibits anatomical knowledge that suggests either direct observation of living specimens or access to artistic traditions that preserved such knowledge across generations. The proportions of head to neck, the arrangement of scales along the jawline, the positioning of teeth within the massive mouth, all demonstrate understanding of draconic anatomy that could only come from sustained study and deep familiarity with the creatures these carvings were meant to represent. Behind this magnificent guardian, carved with such subtlety that many visitors miss it entirely despite its enormous significance, runs the twinning serpent design that represents one of the most important symbolic elements in the entire Zonai architectural vocabulary. The two serpents interweave in patterns that suggest the double helix of genetic information, the fundamental structure of life itself, while simultaneously echoing the eternal dance of opposing forces that drives all natural processes. This carving demonstrates a level of symbolic sophistication that implies philosophical understanding far beyond what we might expect from a culture described primarily in terms of its warlike nature. The serpents do not merely twist around each other in decorative patterns, but follow mathematical relationships that connect to principles of sacred geometry found in the most advanced mystical traditions across multiple cultures and time periods. The placement of this profound symbolic statement directly behind the dragon guardian of the Spring of Courage suggests intentional teaching, as if the architects wanted to ensure that those who approached the sacred waters with proper reverence would encounter layer after layer of meaning, each level deeper and more profound than the last. This is architecture as scripture, construction intended not merely to house activities, but to transform consciousness through direct engagement with symbolic truth. The pillars scattered throughout authentic Zonai sites demonstrate similar layers of meaning embedded within their surface decorations, their serpent patterns incorporating subtle variations that reward careful study with ever deeper levels of understanding. Some pillars feature serpents with their heads raised toward the sky, suggesting aspiration and connection to divine realms. Others show serpents with their heads lowered toward the earth, implying attention to material concerns and practical wisdom needed for survival in the physical world. The spiral patterns that crown many of these pillars function as more than mere decorative elements, incorporating proportions that connect to mathematical principles found in natural growth patterns throughout the organic world. The tick marks that terminate these spirals correspond to specific angular relationships that appear in everything from the arrangement of seeds in sunflower heads to the spiral arms of distant galaxies, suggesting that Zonai architects understood fundamental principles of cosmic organization and sought to embed these truths within their constructed environment. The stone platforms that form the foundation elements of many Zonai structures incorporate similar mathematical relationships in their proportions and positioning, creating resonance effects that amplify the symbolic power of the decorative elements they support. These are not arbitrary construction choices, but deliberate applications of knowledge that connects architectural principles to deeper truths about the nature of reality itself. The weathered condition of these authentic elements tells its own story about the passage of time and the patient work of natural forces, slowly reclaiming human construction. The softened edges of stone carvings, the moss and lichen growth that follows moisture patterns across carved surfaces, the way tree roots have grown through gaps in fitted stonework, all speak of structures that have existed in harmony with their environment for periods measured in millennia rather than centuries. This natural aging process stands in marked contrast to the pristine condition of the Lomé labyrinths, whose sharp edges and clean surfaces suggest either much more recent construction or preservation techniques far beyond anything achieved elsewhere in Zonai architecture. The implications of either possibility raise fundamental questions about the continuity of building traditions and the preservation of technical knowledge across vast periods of time. The darkness that shrouds Typhlo ruins represents another architectural mystery that challenges our understanding of Zonai capabilities and intentions. This perpetual night exists without apparent natural cause, creating an environment where the usual cycles of day and night cease to function, and travelers must navigate by the light of scattered torches that seem to burn with flames that never consume their fuel or fade with time. The torch structures themselves incorporate the distinctive bird imagery that appears throughout Zonai architecture. Their bases carved in forms that suggest owls or other creatures of the night, beings naturally adapted to environments where normal vision fails and other senses must provide guidance. These are not mere light sources, but symbolic beacons that connect to deeper themes about the nature of wisdom and the different forms of illumination that can guide travelers through periods of spiritual darkness. The perpetual night that blankets this site creates acoustic effects that transform the entire ruins into a vast resonance chamber where every footstep and whispered word carries farther than it should and returns as echo from unexpected directions. This acoustic environment suggests intentional design, as if the architects sought to create a space where normal sensory experience would be altered, and visitors forced to develop new forms of awareness and navigation. The shrine hidden within Typhlo ruins requires visitors to master this altered environment before they can claim its treasures, creating a trial that tests adaptability and resourcefulness rather than combat skill or puzzle-solving ability. The challenge lies not in overcoming external obstacles, but in adjusting internal expectations and developing new ways of relating to an environment that operates according to different rules than those found in the normal world. This emphasis on consciousness expansion and adaptation to non-ordinary states of awareness aligns with mystical traditions found in cultures across the world, where sacred sites are specifically designed to alter perception and facilitate experiences that transcend normal waking consciousness. The Zonai architects who created Typhlo ruins understood principles of environmental psychology that modern practitioners are only beginning to rediscover. The integration of these various architectural elements into unified sacred spaces demonstrates a level of planning and coordination that implies sophisticated understanding of how physical structures can be used to facilitate specific types of spiritual and psychological experience. The Zonai were not merely builders, but consciousness engineers, creators who understood how to use stone and space to transform human awareness and facilitate connections to aspects of reality that remain hidden under normal circumstances. The mystery of how such profound knowledge could vanish so completely from the historical record becomes even more perplexing when we consider the obvious sophistication of the architectural legacy these people left behind. Civilizations capable of such understanding do not typically disappear without trace, yet the silence surrounding Zonai culture in all contemporary historical sources suggests a level of suppression or forgetting that goes beyond natural historical processes. The patient stones continue their silent vigil, holding within their carved surfaces secrets that challenge everything we think we know about the development of consciousness and civilization in ancient Hyrule. In the gentle light that filters through jungle canopy to illuminate dragon heads and owl carvings, in the mathematical precision of spiral patterns that encode cosmic truths within decorative elements, lies knowledge that speaks across millennia to souls prepared to listen with more than ordinary attention. Across the vast tapestry of human civilization, certain patterns emerge again and again, weaving themselves through cultures separated by oceans and millennia, as if some fundamental truth about the nature of consciousness and creativity transcends the boundaries of time and geography. The mysterious Zonai tribe of ancient Hyrule, for all their fantastical dragon statues and impossible architectural achievements, did not emerge from a vacuum of pure imagination, but drew their inspiration from the same wellsprings of symbol and meaning that have nourished countless real-world civilizations throughout our own history. The most striking parallels can be found in the great Mesoamerican cultures that flourished in the lands we now call Mexico, where the Aztec Empire rose to dominate central Mexico from approximately 1300 to 1521 of the Common Era. Like the Zonai, the Aztecs were a people defined by warfare, their entire social structure built around the conquest of neighboring peoples and the expansion of their territorial control through superior military organization and ruthless application of force. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, built on the shores of Lake Texcoco in what is now Mexico City, represented one of the most sophisticated urban planning achievements of the ancient world, a city of canals and floating gardens that supported a population numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Yet, for all their architectural and agricultural innovations, the Aztecs remained fundamentally a warrior culture where social advancement depended upon success in battle and religious ceremonies centered around the ritual sacrifice of captured enemies. The parallels to the Zonai descriptions found in the masterworks become even more compelling when we examine the specific architectural elements that characterized Aztec temple construction. The Great Pyramid, known as the Templo Maya, which dominated the center of Tenochtitlan like a man-made mountain reaching toward the heavens, incorporated design elements that bear striking resemblance to the spiral and serpent motifs found throughout Zonai ruins. The battlements that crowned Aztec temples followed patterns based on the spiral shell of snails, creating decorative elements that served both aesthetic and symbolic purposes while providing practical defensive capabilities. These spiral designs incorporated mathematical relationships that connected to broader cosmological understanding, embedding sacred geometry within functional architecture in ways that would have been immediately recognizable to Zonai architects working thousands of miles away and centuries removed in time. Most remarkable of all was the Aztec reverence for the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, a deity whose physical form combined the earthbound power of the snake with the celestial freedom of the bird, in ways that directly parallel the dragon imagery, so central to Zonai religious expression. The great stone heads of Quetzalcoatl that adorned Aztec temples possessed the same serpentine quality found in Zonai dragon carvings, their bodies extending in sinuous curves that suggested both the flow of water and the movement of wind through the upper atmosphere. These were not mere decorative elements, but representations of fundamental cosmic principles, embodiments of forces that connected the material world of human experience to the divine realms where gods and spirits dwelt beyond the reach of ordinary perception. The Aztec understanding that serpent forms could serve as bridges between different levels of reality finds perfect expression in the Zonai placement of dragon guardians at sacred springs, where the boundaries between earth and water between the seen and unseen worlds become fluid and permeable. The Aztec migration stories speak of a people who originated in a northern desert land called Aztlan, from which they journeyed southward to establish their great civilization on the shores of the central Mexican lakes. This pattern of movement from harsh desert environments to more hospitable regions where sophisticated urban cultures could flourish echoes the theoretical migration patterns proposed for the Zonai, who may have originated in the desert regions of ancient Hyrule before establishing their jungle strongholds in the verdant forests of Faerun. The architectural evidence from Hyrule suggests exactly such a progression, with the ancient robots of Lanayru Desert, representing perhaps the earliest technological achievements of a people who would later develop the organic architectural style associated with authentic Zonai construction. The spiral motifs found on these mechanical constructions share essential design elements with the patterns carved into jungle temples, suggesting continuity of symbolic tradition across vastly different environments and building techniques. The concept of a highly advanced civilization departing their desert homeland to establish new settlements in more hospitable regions finds support not only in Aztec historical traditions, but in the archaeological evidence from the American Southwest, where the ancestral Puebloan peoples, formerly known as the Anasazi, created sophisticated urban centers in seemingly impossible locations before mysteriously abandoning them and disappearing from the historical record entirely. The great cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde and Canyon de Chelly represent architectural achievements that rival anything found in more temperate regions, their builders demonstrating mastery of engineering principles that allowed them to create multi-story complexes in locations where most cultures would never have attempted permanent settlement. Yet by 1300 of the Common Era, these magnificent cities stood empty, their inhabitants vanished as completely as if they had never existed, leaving behind only the silent testimony of their stone constructions. This pattern of sudden disappearance by advanced civilizations appears again and again throughout human history, from the Harappan cities of the Indus Valley to the Easter Island culture of Rapa Nui, suggesting that the mysterious fate of the Zonai reflects not some impossible fantasy, but a recurring theme in the actual development of human societies. Civilizations rise to remarkable heights of achievement and then vanish so completely that later peoples who discover their ruins can barely believe they ever existed. The Southeast Asian influences evident in Zonai architecture provide another layer of cultural resonance that connects the fictional civilization of Hyrule to real-world artistic traditions spanning thousands of years of human creativity. The wall patterns found throughout Zonai ruins bear striking resemblance to the decorative elements that characterize the great temple complexes of the Angkorian Empire, which dominated much of present-day Cambodia from the 9th through 15th centuries. The temple complex of Angkor Wat itself represents perhaps the largest religious monument ever constructed, its towers and courtyards covering an area that dwarfs most modern cities while incorporating architectural elements that seem to anticipate the organic integration characteristic of Zonai construction techniques. The Khmer builders who created Angkor Wat understood how to work with water management on a massive scale, creating elaborate systems of canals and reservoirs that not only served practical irrigation needs, but formed integral parts of the temple's symbolic and spiritual program. The vegetation of Faerun Woods, with its mixture of Southeast Asian and Mesoamerican plant species, creates an environment that would have been familiar to builders from either cultural tradition, providing the natural materials and environmental conditions necessary for the development of architectural styles that incorporated living elements into stone construction. The presence of species like Monster deliciosa and various bromeliad families alongside banana plants and palm varieties creates botanical conditions that mirror the diversity found in the great temple gardens of classical Cambodia. This careful attention to environmental detail suggests that the creators of the Zonai mysteries understood the deep connections between cultural expression and ecological context, recognizing that architectural traditions develop in response to specific geographical and climatic conditions that shape both the available materials and the symbolic associations that give meaning to human construction efforts. The integration of water features throughout Zonai architecture reflects practical knowledge that developed independently in multiple river-based civilizations, from the canal systems of ancient Mesopotamia to the hydraulic engineering achievements of the classical Maya. The ability to channel and control flowing water represents one of the fundamental markers of advanced civilization, requiring mathematical understanding, engineering skill, and social organization capable of planning and executing projects that span multiple generations. The sacred springs that appear throughout authentic Zonai sites function simultaneously as practical water sources and as focal points for spiritual practice, embodying the universal human tendency to recognize the sacred qualities of water as the fundamental element that makes all life possible. The dragon guardians that watch over these springs connect to mythological traditions found in cultures across the world, where serpentine water deities serve as intermediaries between human communities and the natural forces upon which their survival depends. The craftsmanship evident in the most sophisticated Zonai carvings, particularly the colossal dragon head that guards the Spring of Courage, demonstrates technical skills that rival the greatest achievements of real-world stone sculptors, working with the finest materials and most advanced tools. The anatomical accuracy of the draconic features, the sophisticated understanding of proportion and perspective, the ability to convey both power and wisdom through purely visual means, all speak to artistic traditions that had developed over centuries of refinement and cultural transmission. Such skills do not emerge spontaneously, but require sustained cultural support for specialist craftsmen, educational systems capable of preserving and transmitting technical knowledge, and economic surpluses sufficient to support non-productive activities on the scale necessary for major architectural projects. The existence of masterwork carvings implies the prior existence of a complex society with characteristics that mirror the great classical civilizations of our own world's history. The mathematical relationships embedded within Zonai spiral patterns connect to numerical principles that appear in sacred architectural traditions spanning from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe, suggesting access to geometric knowledge that transcends cultural boundaries and points toward universal truths about the nature of space, proportion, and harmonic relationships. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, and other mathematical constants that govern natural growth patterns appear throughout human architectural traditions, as if different cultures independently discovered the same fundamental principles that organize reality at its deepest levels. The Zonai spiral, with its distinctive tick mark, represents a unique variation on these universal themes, incorporating elements that may encode specific information about astronomical cycles, seasonal changes, or other natural phenomena that would have been crucial for agricultural and ceremonial planning in a pre-industrial society. The consistency with which these marked spirals appear across different Zonai sites suggests standardized symbolic vocabulary that was understood throughout their cultural sphere, implying educational systems and communication networks sophisticated enough to maintain uniform meaning across diverse geographical regions. The concept of architectural elements serving simultaneously as functional construction components, decorative embellishments, and encoded information storage finds parallels in Gothic cathedral construction. where stonemasons incorporated complex symbolic programs into structural elements that served multiple purposes within unified artistic visions. The great cathedrals of medieval Europe functioned as libraries carved in stone, preserving religious and philosophical knowledge in visual form that could be transmitted across generations, even during periods when literacy remained restricted to small elite populations. The Zonai integration of natural and constructed elements reflects environmental wisdom that developed independently in multiple ecological contexts, from the cliff dwellings of the American Southwest to the treehouse civilizations of Papua New Guinea, where human communities learned to work with natural systems rather than imposing artificial structures that would require constant maintenance and eventual replacement. This organic approach to architecture suggests cultural values that prioritized harmony with natural cycles over domination of the environment, indicating philosophical perspectives that would have supported sustainable relationships with ecological systems across extended periods of time. Such approaches require deep understanding of natural processes and long-term thinking that spans multiple generations, characteristics associated with the most stable and enduring human societies throughout history. The mystery of how such sophisticated cultural achievements could disappear so completely from the historical record reflects the fragility that characterizes even the most advanced civilizations when faced with environmental challenges, military pressures, or internal social disruptions that exceed their adaptive capabilities. The archaeological record of human societies reveals again and again that technological sophistication provides no guarantee against sudden collapse when critical thresholds are exceeded. The Great Library of Alexandria, the urban centers of the classical Maya, the Bronze Age civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean, all demonstrate that knowledge and achievement can vanish with shocking completeness when the social structures that preserve and transmit cultural information break down under stress that overwhelms existing institutional capacities. Yet something always survives, embedded in the landscape itself through architectural remains that outlast the societies that created them, preserved in symbolic traditions that carry forward into new cultural contexts even when their original meanings become obscured or forgotten. The dragon carvings weathering slowly in Pharaon's eternal mist, the spiral patterns traced into stone by hands that have been dust for millennia, continue to speak across the centuries to those who have learned to listen with more than ordinary attention. In the patient stones that hold their secrets against time and weather, in the mathematical relationships that connect ancient spirals to cosmic truth, lie connections that transcend the boundaries between real and imagined worlds, between the historical cultures that once walked our own earth and the fictional civilizations that walk through our dreams. The Zonai mystery draws its power from the same wellsprings of symbol and meaning that have inspired human creativity since consciousness first learned to carve its visions into lasting form. Among all the theories that attempt to explain the mysterious disappearance of the Zonai tribe, none is more compelling or more troubling than the possibility that these ancient people were not merely forgotten victims of time's passage, but active participants in one of the darkest chapters in Hyrule's hidden history. The theory that connects the Zonai to the dark interlopers mentioned in Twilight Princess opens doorways into realms of speculation that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of good and evil, light and shadow, in the eternal struggle that defines the kingdom's destiny. The interlopers of ancient legend were described as a group of powerful sorcerers who rose up in ages past to challenge the very foundations of divine order, wielding magic so potent and terrible that it threatened to overturn the natural balance between the sacred realm and the world of mortal experience. These were not mere rebels against political authority or social convention, but practitioners of arcane arts who sought to claim dominion over the Triforce itself, that sacred relic, which represents the fundamental organizing principle of reality in all its manifestations. The war that followed their uprising was unlike any conflict recorded in the official histories, a battle fought not merely between armies of flesh and blood, but between competing visions of how the universe itself should be ordered and controlled. The interlopers commanded forces that transcended the merely physical, wielding energies drawn from dimensions that ordinary minds could not comprehend, reshaping the very fabric of existence to serve their will to power and domination. Yet for all their terrible might, for all their mastery of magical arts that could bend reality itself to their purposes, the interlopers ultimately faced opponents whose authority derived from sources even more fundamental than their own revolutionary ambitions. The golden goddesses themselves intervened in this cosmic struggle, their divine power flowing through the light spirits to oppose the darkness that threatened to consume not merely the kingdom of Hyrule, but the essential structures that held all creation together. The punishment that followed the interlopers' defeat was swift, terrible, and absolute in its scope and implications for everything that would follow in the ages to come. Rather than simple execution or imprisonment in conventional dungeons, the defeated sorcerers were banished entirely from the world of light and life, cast into a parallel dimension where shadow reigned eternal, and the very concepts of hope and joy became alien abstractions that could barely be remembered as distant dreams. The Twilight Realm that became their prison was not merely a place of exile, but a fundamental transformation of existence itself, where the basic properties of matter and energy operated according to principles that inverted everything the interlopers had known during their lives in the world of light. Here, in this grey netherworld that existed at the margins of reality, the descendants of the banished sorcerers slowly adapted to conditions that would have destroyed lesser beings, their very bodies and souls transforming across generations until they became something entirely new. The Twilight beings who emerged from this process of forced evolution retained echoes of their ancestors' magical capabilities, but these powers were forever tainted by the realm in which they had developed, carrying within them the essential sadness and alienation that characterizes all existence separated from the light of divine grace. They became masters of illusion and shadow, capable of feats that seemed impossible to those who dwelt in the world of solid matter and unchanging physical laws, yet forever haunted by memories of what they had lost in their ancestors' failed bid for ultimate power. The connection between this ancient tragedy and the mysterious Zonai tribe becomes apparent when we examine the specific characteristics that defined both groups and the striking parallels that emerge from careful comparison of their respective legacy. Both civilizations were described as possessing magical abilities that set them apart from other peoples of their respective eras, wielding powers that seemed to blur the boundaries between natural phenomenon and supernatural intervention. The Zonai's architectural achievements, particularly their ability to create structures that integrated seamlessly with natural systems while incorporating mathematical principles that encoded cosmic truths, suggest access to knowledge that transcended ordinary human understanding. The precision with which they carved astronomical relationships into decorative elements, the sophistication of their water management systems, the ability to create perpetual darkness at sites like Typhlo ruins, all point toward magical capabilities that operated according to principles unknown to conventional scholarship. Similarly, the interlopers were characterized not merely as skilled warriors or ambitious politicians, but as masters of sorcery whose understanding of magical principles allowed them to challenge the gods themselves. Their creation of the fused shadow, that terrible artifact which concentrated dark power into forms that could be wielded against divine authority, demonstrates magical engineering capabilities that parallel the Zonai achievement in creating structures that channel and focus natural energies for purposes that remain mysterious to contemporary observers. The warlike nature that characterized both groups provides another point of convergence that strengthens the theoretical connection between Zonai culture and the interloper uprising. The barbarian armor found within the Lome labyrinths carries descriptions that emphasize its power to enhance the fighting spirit of those who wear it, suggesting a civilization that had developed not merely weapons and tactics for warfare, but psychological and spiritual techniques for transforming ordinary individuals into instruments of conquest and domination. The Japanese terminology that refers to this equipment as the clothing of the savage tribe removes any ambiguity about how these people saw themselves and were perceived by their contemporaries. This was not the regalia of peaceful philosophers or contemplative mystics, but the battle gear of warriors who had made conflict the central organizing principle of their entire social structure, who viewed violence not as regrettable necessity, but as sacred calling that defined their relationship with the world around them. The interlopers' challenge to divine authority similarly suggests a culture that had embraced conflict as the fundamental principle of existence, where the willingness to oppose even the gods themselves represented the highest expression of individual and collective will. Their uprising was not motivated by mere political grievance or territorial ambition, but by philosophical commitment to the idea that power should belong to those strong enough to claim and hold it, regardless of traditional concepts of divine right or natural order. The magical techniques that both groups employed show remarkable similarities in their approaches to manipulating the fundamental forces that govern reality at its deepest levels. The Zonai spiral patterns that appear throughout their architectural legacy encode mathematical relationships that connect to the same geometric principles found in the fused shadow and other artifacts associated with interloper magic, suggesting common theoretical foundations for their respective magical practices. The serpent motifs that dominate both Zonai decoration and Twilight Realm imagery point toward shared symbolic vocabularies that may reflect common philosophical understanding about the nature of power and transformation. The twinning serpents carved behind the spring of courage echo the intertwined snakes that appear on the fused shadow, while the dragon heads that guard sacred sites throughout Farron Woods share essential design elements with the serpentine forms that appear throughout the Palace of Twilight. Most compelling of all is the complete absence of both groups from the official historical records maintained by the kingdom's scholars and chroniclers, a silence so profound and systematic that it can only result from deliberate suppression of information deemed too dangerous for general knowledge. The thoroughness with which both the Zonai and the interlopers have been erased from conventional history suggests coordinated efforts by authorities who understood that even the memory of these civilizations posed threats that justified extraordinary measures to prevent their stories from inspiring future generations. This pattern of historical erasure appears again and again in the kingdom's past. Wherever groups or individuals have challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which royal authority and divine order depend for their legitimacy and stability. The Shadow Temple of Ocarina of Time, with its chambers dedicated to torture and interrogation, provides a glimpse of the methods by which inconvenient truths have been systematically eliminated from public consciousness, while the loyalty oath that bound the Sheikah to serve the royal family demonstrates the institutional mechanisms by which dangerous knowledge has been contained and controlled. The luminous stones that glow with pale blue light throughout the ruins associated with Zonai architecture may represent physical evidence of the magical techniques that connected both civilizations to sources of power that transcended ordinary natural phenomena. These mysterious objects, which some scholars believe contain the souls of the dead, emit the same ethereal radiance that characterizes the Twilight Realm itself, suggesting common origins or shared magical techniques that produce similar effects across different dimensions of existence. The theory that luminous stones serve as repositories for spiritual energy finds support in the behavior of these objects during blood moon events, when the malice of Calamity Ganon surges throughout the kingdom and temporarily overwhelms the barriers that normally separate the world of the living from the realm of the dead. During these supernatural nights, the stone's glow intensifies dramatically, as if responding to energies that flow from the same sources that once powered both Zonai magic and interloper sorcery. The Palace of Twilight itself incorporates architectural elements that bear striking resemblance to authentic Zonai construction techniques, particularly in the use of serpentine decorative motifs and mathematical proportions that create resonance effects similar to those found at sites like the Spring of Courage. The throne room where Zant held court features symmetrical serpent statues that echo the twinning snake designs found throughout Farron Woods, while the overall layout of the palace follows geometric principles that mirror the sacred geometry embedded within Zonai spiral patterns. The fused shadow that served as the primary weapon in the interlopers' war against divine authority incorporates design elements that connect directly to Zonai symbolic vocabulary, particularly in its use of serpent imagery and mathematical relationships that encode cosmic truths within artistic representations. The mask-like central element features twin snakes breathing fire, creatures that embody the same dual nature represented by the twinning serpents carved behind the Spring of Courage, suggesting shared understanding of fundamental principles that govern the relationship between opposing forces in the cosmic order. The color associations that connect both Twilight Realm energy and luminous stone emanations to the blue-green spectrum suggest common sources for the magical techniques that characterize both civilizations, indicating possible shared theoretical foundations for their respective approaches to manipulating supernatural forces. The consistent appearance of these specific wavelengths across different manifestations of ancient magic implies underlying physical or metaphysical principles that remain constant regardless of the specific cultural contexts in which they appear. The geographical distribution of ruins associated with both groups shows patterns that support theories of common origin or extensive cultural exchange during the periods when both civilizations flourished. The desert regions where ancient robots incorporating Zonai spiral motifs have been discovered lie adjacent to areas where Twilight Realm influence appears strongest, suggesting possible territorial overlaps that would have facilitated knowledge sharing between peoples who possessed complementary magical capabilities. The Mirror of Twilight itself, that artifact which served as both gateway and prison for the banished interlopers, incorporates serpent patterns that match designs found throughout authentic Zonai architecture, raising the disturbing possibility that this powerful magical device was created using techniques that originated within Zonai cultural traditions. If the mirror represents collaborative effort between multiple magical civilizations, it would explain both the sophistication of its construction and the tragic irony of a people being destroyed by weapons based on their own theoretical innovations. The Arbiter's grounds, where the mirror was housed, and where executions were carried out by royal decree, features architectural elements that clearly connect to Gerudo cultural traditions, but also incorporates design motifs that appear throughout both Zonai ruins and Twilight Realm constructions. The presence of serpent imagery in a facility dedicated to punishment and imprisonment suggests deliberate symbolic programming intended to remind observers of the fate that awaits those who challenge established authority through magical means. The timing of the interloper uprising which according to legend occurred before the establishment of the unified kingdom of Hyrule, aligns with theoretical timelines proposed for Zonai civilization, and suggests possible historical connections that would explain the remarkable similarities between the two groups. If the Zonai were indeed among the peoples who participated in the war over the sacred realm, their subsequent disappearance from the historical record would represent not mere forgetting, but active suppression of memories too dangerous to preserve. The division of magical peoples into those who accepted banishment to the Twilight Realm and those who chose alternative fates may explain the apparent split within Zonai culture itself, where some elements seem to have embraced darkness and conflict while others maintained connections to sacred sites and protective duties that aligned with divine will rather than opposing it. The reverence for dragons evident throughout authentic Zonai architecture suggests a faction that chose to honor cosmic order rather than challenge it, while the neglect of boar statuary implies rejection of the power-hungry impulses that led their kinsmen to destruction. The evolution of the interlopers into the twilight beings who appear in later eras demonstrates the long-term consequences of magical practices that violate natural law and divine order, showing how the pursuit of power without wisdom inevitably leads to transformation that destroys the essential humanity of those who embrace such paths. The tragedy of the Twilight people lies not merely in their exile from the world of light, but in their gradual loss of everything that once made them recognizably human, including the ability to find meaning and purpose beyond the exercise of power over others. Yet even in their transformed state, the Twilight beings retain echoes of the wisdom and magical capability that once characterized their ancestors, suggesting that knowledge and power, once gained, can never be entirely destroyed but only changed in form and expression. The melancholy that pervades Twilight Realm culture reflects not mere sadness at their exile, but profound understanding of what they sacrificed in their ancestors' quest for dominion over forces that were never meant to be controlled by mortal will. The connection between ancient magical practices and the modern manifestations of malice that flow from Calamity Ganon suggests continuity of dark traditions that span millennia, where each generation of power seekers draws upon the same corrupted sources that destroyed their predecessors. The purple energy that characterizes both Ganon's influence and the residual effects of interloper magic implies shared origins for supernatural phenomena that appear throughout different eras of the kingdom's history. In the gentle darkness before sleep, we can contemplate the tragic beauty of civilizations that reached toward transcendence, but found only exile and transformation beyond recognition. The Zonai mystery, whether connected to the interloper legend or standing alone as separate tragedy, reminds us that the pursuit of power without wisdom leads inevitably to destruction of everything that makes existence meaningful and beautiful. The stone dragons that guard forgotten springs, the spiral patterns that encode cosmic truths within decorative elements, stand as monuments not only to vanished greatness, but to the eternal choice between light and shadow that defines every soul's journey through the labyrinth of existence. In the ancient desert wastes of Lanayru, where the relentless sun has baked the earth into crystalline formations that catch and scatter light like fragments of captured starfire, lie ruins that predate even the earliest records of Hyrulean civilization. Here, among the shifting sands and weathered stone platforms, mechanical beings of incredible sophistication once walked the earth with purpose and intelligence that rivaled the greatest achievements of any age. These ancient robots, with their distinctive rounded forms and precisely articulated joints, represent perhaps the most tangible connection between the mysterious Zonai culture and the advanced civilizations that preceded them in the long march of time across the desert's endless expanse. The robots themselves display design characteristics that bridge the gap between the organic architectural principles found in Zonai jungle sites and the mathematical precision that characterizes Sheikah technology, incorporating spiral patterns and curved surfaces that speak of aesthetic sensibilities far removed from purely functional considerations. Their creators understood that beings intended to serve alongside organic life required forms that harmonized with natural proportions rather than opposing them, resulting in mechanical constructions that possessed an almost living quality despite their obviously artificial origins. The headpieces worn by these remarkable constructions feature the same hooked spiral design that appears throughout authentic Zonai architecture, carved with the precise tick marks that distinguish genuine Zonai symbolic vocabulary from later imitations or coincidental similarities. This consistency of symbolic language across vastly different construction techniques and materials suggests cultural continuity that spans the transition from organic building traditions to advanced mechanical engineering, indicating either extended historical development within a single civilization or remarkable preservation of design principles across multiple generations of technological innovation. The ancient sea chart that guides navigation through the sand ship incorporates identical spiral motifs, their mathematical proportions encoding navigational information within decorative elements that serve multiple functions simultaneously. This integration of practical knowledge with symbolic representation demonstrates the sophisticated approach to information storage that characterizes the most advanced ancient technologies, where essential data was embedded within aesthetic elements that could preserve meaning across extended periods, even when the specific practical applications might be temporarily forgotten. The sand ship itself represents a technological marvel that defies easy classification within conventional understanding of mechanical engineering, combining the mobility of seafaring vessels with the industrial capabilities of manufacturing facilities, in ways that suggest mastery of principles that remain mysterious to contemporary observers. The rails and doors throughout this mechanical wonder display the same spiral patterns found on Zonai statuary, their curved forms creating visual rhythms that connect directly to the mathematical relationships encoded within dragon and owl carvings scattered throughout Farron's jungle depths. The gust bellows technology found within the Lanairu mining facility demonstrates another crucial connection between ancient mechanical achievements and the natural forces that the Zonai learned to channel through their architectural innovations. These devices harness and direct wind energy with precision that suggests deep understanding of atmospheric dynamics, creating focused streams of moving air that can clear obstacles, power machinery, and alter environmental conditions in ways that blur the boundaries between technology and magic. The mining facility itself incorporates design elements that clearly reference both Sheikah aesthetic principles and the organic integration techniques that characterize authentic Zonai construction, suggesting collaborative effort between multiple advanced civilizations whose combined knowledge produced technological achievements that exceeded what any single culture might have accomplished working in isolation. The facility's ability to continue operating across millennia of abandonment speaks to engineering principles that connected mechanical function to natural energy cycles in ways that ensured sustainability across extended periods. Without maintenance or oversight, the timestones scattered throughout the Lanairu region provide perhaps the most compelling evidence for the advanced temporal manipulation capabilities that may have been shared between the desert's mechanical civilization and the jungle-dwelling Zonai, whose perpetual darkness at Typhlo ruins suggests mastery of environmental control techniques that transcend ordinary natural phenomena. These crystalline artifacts demonstrate the ability to create localized alterations in the flow of time itself, restoring ancient mechanisms to full functionality by reversing the entropic processes that normally reduce complex systems to inert matter. The implications of such technology extend far beyond mere mechanical restoration to touch upon fundamental questions about the nature of time, causality, and the relationship between consciousness and physical reality that have puzzled philosophers across cultures and eras. The ability to manipulate temporal flow suggests understanding of cosmic principles that connect individual moments to the vast cyclical processes that govern everything from planetary orbits to the life cycle patterns of organic beings, indicating theoretical knowledge that approaches the divine in its scope and implications. The ancient robot's creator, known only through the fragmentary notes left behind by Gondo's grandfather, represents a bridge between the purely mechanical achievements of the desert civilization and the organic wisdom traditions that would later characterize Zonai culture in its mature jungle phase. This mysterious figure possessed knowledge that spanned multiple technological domains while maintaining awareness of natural principles that prevented his innovations from becoming merely exploitative impositions upon environmental systems that required harmony rather than domination. The connection between Gondo himself and the residents of Laurelin village provides another thread in the complex tapestry that links desert mechanical traditions to jungle architectural achievements, suggesting genealogical continuity that preserved essential knowledge across the vast geographical and temporal distances that separate Lanairu's ancient ruins from Faron's living forests. The spiral motifs that appear on the larger boats in Laurelin's harbour echo the patterns found throughout both mechanical desert sites and organic jungle constructions, indicating cultural transmission that maintained symbolic consistency across radically different environmental contexts. The wind magic that appears to have powered much of the ancient desert technology finds its counterpart in the atmospheric manipulation capabilities demonstrated at Zonai sites like Typhlo ruins, where perpetual darkness suggests mastery of environmental control that operates according to principles similar to those employed by the gust bellows and other pneumatic devices found throughout the mining facility. This shared focus on atmospheric manipulation implies common theoretical foundations for magical and technological approaches to environmental modification, suggesting collaborative development or cultural exchange between civilizations that might otherwise appear completely separate. The evolution from desert technology to jungle mysticism may reflect a natural progression in civilizational development, where purely mechanical approaches to problem-solving gradually give way to more holistic methodologies that integrate technological capability with spiritual wisdom in ways that prove more sustainable across extended periods. The organic architecture of mature Zonai sites suggests a people who had learned to work with natural forces rather than simply harnessing them, indicating philosophical evolution that moved beyond mere technical mastery toward deeper understanding of humanity's proper relationship with the living systems that support all existence. The Sky People, who appear in later eras of Hyrulean history, may represent the direct descendants of this desert to jungle civilization, their aerial cities demonstrating the ultimate expression of technological and spiritual integration where advanced engineering serves transcendent purposes rather than merely practical goals. The Dominion Rod that serves as their primary technological interface incorporates the same mathematical proportions found in both desert mechanical devices and jungle architectural elements, suggesting continuous development of design principles that remained consistent across multiple phases of cultural evolution. The city in the sky itself incorporates architectural elements that clearly reference both traditions, combining the precision engineering characteristic of desert technology with the organic integration principles that define authentic Zonai construction. The spiral patterns that appear throughout the floating city match those found on ancient mechanical devices while incorporating the sophisticated symbolic programs that characterize jungle temple complexes, creating unified aesthetic vocabulary that bridges the gap between technological achievement and spiritual expression. The Oka who inhabit this aerial realm display physical characteristics that may reflect the ultimate evolutionary development of the same consciousness that created both the ancient robots and the Zonai architectural legacy, their bird-like forms representing adaptation to aerial environments, while their technological capabilities demonstrate continuity with the advanced engineering traditions that originated in the desert millennia earlier. Their role as intermediaries between divine and mortal realms suggests philosophical evolution that transformed purely technical civilization into something approaching angelic existence. The Dominion Rod's presence within the Temple of Time indicates the crucial role that Sky People technology played in the establishment and maintenance of Hyrule's fundamental religious and political institutions, connecting the advanced capabilities of aerial civilization to the practical needs of earthbound communities in ways that benefited both domains. The rod's ability to animate and control ancient statuary demonstrates mastery of consciousness transfer techniques that may represent the culmination of research that began with the animation principles employed in desert robot construction. The Tower of the Gods that appears in Wind Waker's flooded world incorporates design elements that clearly reference both Sky People architectural traditions and the organic integration principles found in authentic Zonai construction, suggesting that the aerial civilization maintained its connection to earlier cultural phases while developing new capabilities appropriate to their elevated existence. The tower's function as divine trial for heroic candidates indicates that the Sky People served as guardians and teachers rather than distant observers, using their advanced capabilities to facilitate spiritual development in worthy individuals. The mechanical puzzles within the Tower of the Gods require understanding of principles that connect consciousness to physical manipulation in ways that echo both the ancient robot's animation techniques and the environmental control capabilities demonstrated at sites like Typhlo Ruins. The command melody that allows the hero to direct statue movement represents musical interface with consciousness transfer technology, suggesting that the Sky People had developed sonic methods for controlling mechanical systems that operated according to harmonic principles rather than purely mechanical ones. The Armos statues that appear throughout multiple games in the series may represent standardized products of the consciousness transfer techniques that originated with ancient robot construction and reached full development in Sky People civilization. Their consistent design and animation patterns, indicating mass production capabilities that could supply guardian constructs to communities across vast geographical areas. The placement of these constructs at temples and other sacred sites suggests their primary function involved protection of spiritual resources rather than military applications. The Wind Waker itself, that mysterious instrument capable of controlling weather patterns and directing the movements of both organic and mechanical beings, may represent the pinnacle of Sky People technological achievement, combining atmospheric manipulation techniques pioneered in the desert with consciousness interface capabilities developed during the aerial phase of their civilization. The instrument's ability to function across multiple domains simultaneously suggests integration of technological and magical approaches that transcends the limitations inherent in either methodology alone. The relationship between wind magic and consciousness manipulation that characterizes Sky People's civilization finds echoes in the atmospheric control techniques demonstrated at Zonai sites. suggesting that both cultures had discovered connections between mental states and environmental conditions that allowed trained practitioners to alter physical reality through focused intention, channeled according to proper technical principles. This integration of mystical and mechanical approaches represents perhaps the most sophisticated achievement of any civilization in Hyrulean history. The gradual evolution from desert machinery to aerial mysticism demonstrates a developmental pathway that many advanced civilizations might follow, where purely technical solutions to practical problems eventually give way to more holistic approaches that integrate material and spiritual dimensions of existence in ways that prove more sustainable and fulfilling across extended periods. The Sky People's choice to ascend above the conflicts and limitations of surface existence represents one possible resolution to the challenges that face any civilization capable of transcending ordinary physical constraints. Yet this transcendence came at a cost, as the Sky People's removal from surface involvement left earthbound communities without the guidance and support that their advanced capabilities might have provided during crucial historical periods. Their isolation in aerial realms suggests the inherent tension between transcendent achievement and practical responsibility that challenges any civilization that develops beyond the limitations that bind ordinary existence to familiar patterns and concerns. The ancient robots that still wander the desert ruins serve as reminders of what was lost when their creators chose to leave the physical realm for higher dimensions of existence. Their continued operation across millennia, demonstrating the durability of properly designed systems, while their obvious loneliness speaks to the irreplaceable value of conscious companionship and shared purpose in any meaningful existence. These mechanical beings preserve not only technological capabilities but emotional resonance that connects contemporary observers to the hopes and dreams of vanished civilizations. The Lanayru Desert itself, with its crystalline formations and temporal anomalies, may represent the physical legacy of experiments in consciousness and reality manipulation that connected desert technological traditions to the mystical achievements of later Zonai culture and Sky People civilization. The landscape bears witness to investigations into the fundamental nature of time, space, and awareness that pushed the boundaries of what organic beings could achieve through combination of advanced technology and transcendent wisdom. In the shifting sands that cover ancient platforms and weathered mechanisms, in the spiral patterns that connect mechanical precision to organic wisdom, lies evidence of humanity's eternal quest to transcend the limitations that bind ordinary existence to familiar patterns and achieve something greater than mere survival or material success. The path from desert technology through jungle mysticism to aerial transcendence represents one possible trajectory for conscious development, though not the only one available to beings capable of learning and growth. The mystery of what became of these remarkable civilizations continues to resonate through the ages, their achievements serving as inspiration and warning for contemporary communities that face their own choices about the relationship between technological capability and spiritual wisdom. In the gentle darkness before sleep, we can contemplate the spiraling pathways that connect mechanical ingenuity to mystical insight, finding in their patterns guidance for our own journey through the labyrinth of existence toward whatever transcendence awaits beyond the horizon of current understanding. Throughout the vast pantheon of creatures that populate the mythologies and legends of countless cultures across the world, few beings command the same universal reverence and complex symbolic significance as the dragon, that serpentine embodiment of primordial power whose sinuous form bridges the realms of earth and sky, water and fire, wisdom and destruction in ways that speak to something fundamental in the human understanding of divine force made manifest in physical reality. In the mysterious ruins scattered throughout ancient Hyrule, the dragon appears not merely as decorative motif or casual artistic choice, but as the central organizing symbol around which an entire civilization built its understanding of cosmic order and spiritual truth. The reverence that the Zonai displayed toward draconic imagery transcends simple animal worship or totemic identification to encompass a sophisticated theological system that recognized in the dragon's form a perfect representation of the forces that govern existence at its most fundamental levels. Unlike the realistic depictions of living creatures that appear in other cultural traditions, Zonai dragon carvings possess an archetypal quality that suggests their creators sought to capture not the physical appearance of actual dragons, but rather the essential spiritual principles that such creatures embody in their role as intermediaries between mortal consciousness and divine wisdom. The colossal dragon head that guards the Spring of Courage represents perhaps the most magnificent expression of this reverential understanding, its proportions so perfectly calculated and its execution so masterfully achieved that the great stone face seems ready to lift itself from the cliff and speak truths that have been waiting ages for the proper audience to receive them. Every scale has been carved with attention to anatomical detail that suggests either direct observation of living specimens or access to artistic traditions that preserved such knowledge across generations of cultural transmission. The positioning of this magnificent guardian directly above the sacred spring creates a symbolic program of extraordinary sophistication, where the life-giving waters that flow from the earth's depths pass through the protective embrace of draconic wisdom before reaching those who approach with proper reverence and understanding. The spring itself bubbles up through carved channels that direct its flow along paths that seem both natural and purposeful, creating acoustic effects that transform the sound of moving water into something approaching celestial music. The dragon's jaws, opened wide as if in the act of speaking or singing, frame the sacred waters in ways that invite contemplation of the relationship between wisdom and the source of all life, suggesting that true knowledge flows from the same divine wellspring that nourishes physical existence. The careful integration of natural water flow with artificial stonework demonstrates engineering capabilities that operated according to principles unknown to conventional architectural traditions, where form and function achieved perfect unity in service of spiritual rather than merely practical goals. Behind this magnificent guardian, carved with such subtlety that casual observers often miss its presence entirely, despite its profound significance for understanding Zonai theological principles, runs the twinning serpent design that represents one of the most important symbolic elements in their entire architectural vocabulary. The two serpents interweave in patterns that encode mathematical relationships connecting to fundamental cosmic principles, their bodies flowing together in configurations that suggest both the double helix structure of genetic information and the eternal dance of opposing forces that drives all natural processes. This carving demonstrates symbolic sophistication that implies philosophical understanding far beyond what surface descriptions of Zonai culture as merely warlike and barbaric would suggest, indicating access to mystical traditions that recognize serpentine forms as representations of the Kundalini energy that rises through the subtle body during advanced spiritual practices. The precise mathematical relationships governing the serpents interweaving follow proportions that appear in sacred architectural traditions spanning from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe, suggesting universal principles that transcend cultural boundaries. The dragon statues scattered throughout authentic Zonai sites display consistent design characteristics that distinguish them clearly from the owl and boar motifs that complete their sacred trilogy. their serpentine bodies extending in sinuous curves that capture the fluid dynamics of both flowing water and wind movement through the upper atmosphere. These are not static representations, but dynamic forms that seem to embody motion even in their stone stillness, their poses suggesting creatures caught in the eternal dance of cosmic forces, rather than merely resting or displaying themselves for artistic effect. The anatomical accuracy evident in even the smallest details speaks to artistic traditions that had developed sophisticated understanding of draconic physiology, whether through direct observation or through preservation of knowledge that originated with earlier civilizations that may have maintained closer relationships with these legendary creatures. The proportions of head to neck, the arrangement of scales along the body, the positioning of limbs and claws, all demonstrate familiarity with draconic anatomy that could only result from sustained study and deep cultural investment in understanding these beings. The weathering patterns visible on authentic dragon carvings tell their own story about the passage of time and the patient work of natural forces, slowly softening the sharp edges of worked stone. Yet even after millennia of exposure to rain and wind, heat and cold, these magnificent sculptures retain their essential power to inspire awe and contemplation in those who encounter them. The moss and lichen growth that follows moisture patterns across their surfaces creates natural coloration that enhances rather than obscures the original artistic vision, suggesting harmony between human creativity and natural processes that continues across vast spans of time. The living dragons that soar through the skies of contemporary Hyrule, their serpentine forms tracing paths across the heavens that mirror the mathematical relationships encoded in ancient stone carvings, may represent the continuation of the same spiritual lineage that the Zonai recognized and honored through their architectural achievements. Farosh, with her electric energy crackling along golden scales, embodies the divine power that flows through all existence and can be channeled by those who understand proper techniques for accessing cosmic forces. Dinral, wreathed in flames that speak to the transformative fires of spiritual purification, carries within her burning aura the same energy that motivated Zonai artisans to carve dragon guardians at sacred sites throughout their cultural sphere. Her appearance at dawn and dusk, those liminal moments when day transforms into night and night gives birth to new day, connects her presence to the eternal cycles that govern not only natural phenomena, but the deepest patterns of consciousness development. Nadra, shrouded in ice that preserves essential truths within crystalline structures impervious to the decay that affects ordinary matter, represents the aspect of draconic wisdom that transcends temporal limitations and maintains perfect knowledge across all changes and transformations. Her path through the mountain regions connects her to the Earth's solid foundations, while her ability to soar through the highest atmospheres links her to celestial realms beyond ordinary perception. The elemental associations that characterize these living dragons correspond to the three aspects of divine power represented by the Triforce itself, suggesting that the Zonai understanding of draconic symbolism encompassed not merely reverence for powerful creatures, but recognition that such beings serve as manifestations of the fundamental forces that organize reality at its deepest levels. Fire, ice, and electricity represent the active, preserving, and transformative aspects of cosmic energy, whose proper balance maintains the stability necessary for conscious existence. The twinning serpent motif that appears throughout authentic Zonai architecture finds echoes in dragon representations scattered across multiple games in the series, suggesting either common symbolic origins or parallel development of similar theological insights by different cultures encountering the same archetypal truths. The serpentine forms carved into the walls of Skyward Sword's Earth Temple display the same essential characteristics found in Zonai work, their bodies intertwining in patterns that encode similar mathematical relationships and spiritual principles. The dragon statues that appear in various forms throughout Wind Waker's oceanic world carry design elements that clearly reference the same symbolic vocabulary. Their serpentine bodies and draconic heads, incorporating proportions and decorative details that suggest cultural continuity or knowledge preservation across the vast temporal distances that separate different games in the series. The consistency of these design elements implies either remarkable preservation of artistic traditions or universal recognition of archetypal forms that transcend specific cultural contexts. The Earth Temple's twinning dragons, positioned at the dungeon's entrance like guardians of threshold spaces, create symbolic programs that mirror the protective function served by the great dragon head at the Spring of Courage, their placement suggesting that draconic wisdom provides necessary preparation for encounters with sacred forces that might otherwise overwhelm unprepared consciousness. The temple's interior incorporates additional serpentine imagery that extends and develops these threshold themes throughout the entire spiritual journey, represented by successful navigation of its challenges. Dragon Roost Cavern presents another variation on these themes, its entrance marked by twinning dragon designs, whose colors echo the golden radiance of Farosh, while incorporating the flowing patterns that characterize authentic Zonai serpentine motifs. The cavern's guardian, Valu, embodies the protective aspect of draconic wisdom, while his relationship with the Rito people demonstrates how proper reverence for draconic power can result in mutually beneficial partnerships between human communities and spiritual forces. The beams that protrude from the cavern walls resemble draconic arms reaching out to support the structural integrity of the sacred space, their positioning creating acoustic effects that amplify Valu's roar into sounds that can be heard across vast distances. This integration of draconic imagery with practical architectural function demonstrates the same holistic approach to construction that characterizes authentic Zonai sites, where symbolic elements serve multiple purposes simultaneously. The Buddhist philosophical framework that appears to inform much of Zonai's symbolic vocabulary finds perfect expression in their treatment of draconic imagery, where serpentine forms represent not only divine power, but the specific spiritual challenges that must be overcome during the journey toward enlightenment. The three root poisons that Buddhist tradition identifies as the primary obstacles to spiritual development find symbolic representation in the animal motifs that dominate Zonai architecture, with the dragon embodying the particular form of delusion that mistakes power for wisdom. The pig or boar that appears less frequently in Zonai ruins corresponds to the poison of greed and attachment, its earthbound nature representing consciousness trapped by material desires, and inability to recognize the temporary nature of all physical phenomena. The owl motifs that appear throughout the architectural complex embody the poison of hatred and aversion, their nocturnal associations connecting them to the darkness that results from rejection of unwanted aspects of existence rather than integration through understanding. The dragon's serpentine form encompasses the most subtle and dangerous of the three poisons, representing delusion and ignorance that masquerade as wisdom and understanding while actually preventing true insight into the nature of reality. The Zonai reverence for draconic imagery suggests recognition that power without proper understanding leads inevitably to spiritual destruction, yet their continued use of such symbolism indicates faith that draconic energy can be transformed from obstacle into ally through proper spiritual practice. The wheel of life that appears in Tibetan Buddhist temples incorporates identical animal symbolism, its three central creatures representing the same spiritual poisons, while the wheel's rotation suggests the eternal cycling through life and death that continues until enlightenment breaks the pattern of compulsive existence. The Zonai architectural program may represent a similar teaching system, where encounter with the three animal motifs provides opportunity for recognition and transformation of the psychological patterns they represent. The colossal scale of the Dragon Guardian at the Spring of Courage suggests understanding that transformation of the delusion poison requires confrontation with forces that operate on cosmic rather than merely personal levels, where individual consciousness must expand to encompass universal principles before proper discrimination between wisdom and mere cleverness becomes possible. The dragon's protective stance over the sacred waters indicates that such transformation occurs through direct contact with spiritual forces rather than intellectual analysis alone. The spiral patterns that appear throughout draconic imagery encode the same mathematical relationships that govern natural growth processes from the cellular level to galactic structures, suggesting that proper understanding of draconic symbolism requires recognition of the universal principles that organize reality at all scales of existence. The tick marks that terminate these spirals correspond to specific moments in the consciousness development process, where qualitative transformation becomes possible through accumulated quantitative change. The perpetual darkness that shrews Typhlo ruins creates environmental conditions that facilitate the type of consciousness alteration necessary for proper engagement with draconic symbolism, where ordinary sensory input becomes unreliable and awareness must develop new forms of navigation that operate according to intuitive rather than analytical principles. The bird torches that provide the only illumination in this space suggest that draconic darkness serves ultimately to reveal owl wisdom, where apparent obstacles transform into guidance for those who learn to see with inner rather than outer vision. The integration of water features throughout sites where draconic imagery appears. Most prominently, indicates recognition that transformation of consciousness requires emotional as well as intellectual engagement with spiritual forces, where the flow of feeling provides the dynamic energy necessary for breaking through conceptual limitations that trap awareness within familiar patterns. The sound of moving water creates acoustic environments that facilitate meditative states where symbolic recognition can occur below the threshold of ordinary thinking processes. The careful positioning of dragon guardians at sacred springs suggests understanding that access to spiritual wisdom requires protection from forces that would contaminate or misdirect the transformative energies that flow from divine sources. The dragon's role as threshold guardian indicates that proper preparation involves confrontation with the very power complexes that might otherwise co-opt spiritual energy for ego enhancement rather than genuine transcendence. In the gentle darkness that precedes sleep, we can contemplate the patient wisdom of stone dragons whose serpentine forms continue their eternal vigil over sacred waters that flow from sources deeper than conscious understanding. Their carved eyes, weathered by centuries of rain and wind yet still radiating protective presence, remind us that true power serves wisdom rather than commanding it, that draconic energy transforms from obstacle into ally through recognition of our proper relationship to forces that transcend individual will and desire. The mathematical precision of their spiral decorations, encoding cosmic truths within aesthetic elements that please the eye while instructing the soul, suggests that beauty itself serves as bridge between ordinary perception and transcendent understanding. In their stone stillness that paradoxically embodies eternal motion, in their protective fierceness that guards rather than threatens, lies teaching that spans the apparent contradiction between power and compassion, between individual achievement and universal service. The twinning serpents that dance their eternal spiral behind the great guardian remind us that all apparent opposites resolve into unified truth when consciousness expands sufficiently to encompass the larger patterns that contain organized seeming contradictions. In their mathematical interweaving that encodes the very structure of genetic information, the blueprint of physical existence itself, we find confirmation that wisdom, traditions, and scientific understanding point toward the same fundamental truths about the nature of reality and our place within its vast unfolding. The question of when exactly the Zonai walked among the living inhabitants of ancient Hyrule represents one of the most perplexing chronological puzzles in the entire historical record, a mystery that becomes more complex and contradictory. The deeper scholars venture into the labyrinth of evidence that surrounds this vanished civilization. Unlike other ancient peoples whose rise and fall can be traced through archaeological layers and documentary sources that provide at least approximate dates for major cultural developments, the Zonai seem to exist in a temporal vacuum that defies conventional historical analysis and challenges our most basic assumptions about how civilizations develop, flourish, and ultimately disappear from the stage of human experience. The developer's characterization of the Zonai as a culture from prehistory immediately establishes the fundamental difficulty that confronts any attempt to place them within the established chronology of Hyrulean civilization, since the very concept of prehistory refers to periods that existed before the development of written records or systematic documentation of human activities. By definition, prehistoric cultures exist beyond the reach of conventional historical methodology, their stories preserved only in the material traces they left behind, and the fragmentary oral traditions that may have survived the passage of countless generations. Yet the application of prehistoric designation to the Zonai creates immediate complications when we consider the sophisticated nature of their architectural achievements and the clear evidence of their integration with other advanced civilizations that possessed highly developed technologies and complex social organization. The proximity of Zonai ruins to Sheikah shrines, the mathematical sophistication of their symbolic programs, the evidence of advanced engineering in their water management systems, all suggest a people who had moved well beyond the primitive stages typically associated with prehistoric development. The interpretation of this temporal placement depends heavily upon how we understand the overall chronological structure of the Zelda series and the specific position that Breath of the Wild occupies within that vast narrative framework. If we view Breath of the Wild as representing the culmination of all previous timeline branches, a convergence point where the various possible histories of Hyrule ultimately unite, then the Zonai could represent elements from any or all of the earlier historical periods, their traces preserved across multiple timelines and finally manifesting together in the unified world where Link awakens from his century of healing sleep. Under this interpretation, the Zonai prehistory extends back to the very earliest periods of Hyrulean development, potentially encompassing the era immediately following the events of Skyward Sword, when the descendants of Skyloft first returned to the surface world and began the process of establishing permanent settlements in the lands below the cloud barrier. The knowledge that the Zonai possessed of advanced architectural techniques and sacred geometry might represent preservation of wisdom traditions that originated with the Sky People themselves, passed down through generations of cultural transmission until they found expression in the jungle temples and desert observatories that mark their territorial extent. The alternative interpretation treats Breath of the Wild as a standalone narrative that exists independently of the broader timeline considerations, allowing the Zonai to occupy whatever temporal position best serves the specific story being told without regard for consistency with events depicted in other games. Under this framework, Zonai prehistory becomes a more flexible concept that can accommodate various theories about their origins and development without creating contradictions that require elaborate explanatory frameworks to resolve. The relationship between Zonai ruins and the Sheikah Shrine network provides perhaps the most crucial evidence for determining the chronological position of this mysterious civilization, since the shrines themselves are explicitly dated to the period 10,000 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, when the first great calamity threatened the kingdom and advanced technology was developed to combat that ancient evil. The consistent proximity of Zonai architectural elements to shrine locations suggests either remarkable coincidence or deliberate coordination between the two building traditions. If the Zonai existed and constructed their monuments before the shrine network was established, then the later placement of shrines near existing ruins would indicate that the Sheikah recognized some special significance in these ancient sites, perhaps viewing them as locations where spiritual energy naturally concentrated or where the veil between different dimensions of reality had been thinned through prolonged sacred use. The mathematical relationships embedded within Zonai decorative elements might have provided guidance for shrine placement according to principles of sacred geometry that the Sheikah understood and incorporated into their own technological achievements. Alternatively, if the Zonai architectural program developed after the shrine network was already in place, their construction near existing shrines would suggest a people who understood and respected the spiritual significance of these Sheikah installations, while developing their own complementary approach to working with the same energetic phenomena. This timeline would place Zonai civilization somewhere within the 10,000-year period between the first great calamity and Link's awakening, providing a more constrained temporal framework while still allowing considerable flexibility in determining specific dates. The evidence from the Ferron Tower provides a particularly intriguing piece of the chronological puzzle, since the Sheikah Tower's emergence from underground appears to have caused significant damage to surrounding Zonai ruins, suggesting that at least some of these structures existed before the tower network was activated by Link's touch upon the Great Plateau. Yet the towers themselves are part of the ancient Sheikah technological system that dates back 10,000 years, creating an apparent contradiction that requires careful analysis to resolve. One possibility is that the towers remained buried and inactive for the entire 10,000-year period following the first Great Calamity, during which time Zonai construction took place in areas that would later be disrupted when the towers finally emerged. This would place active Zonai civilization sometime within that vast intermediate period, potentially explaining both their architectural sophistication and their eventual disappearance as consequences of historical events that occurred during the long peace that preceded Calamity Ganon's recent return. The alternative explanation suggests that the towers were briefly activated during the ancient period before being deliberately buried again, possibly as part of the same systematic suppression of advanced technology that led to the exile of the Sheikah from the royal court. Under this scenario, Zonai construction around the tower sites would have occurred during the period when the towers stood tall and visible, with their subsequent burial creating the apparent archaeological sequence that suggests Zonai ruins predating tower emergence. The complete absence of Zonai references from Impa's historical narrative presents another significant challenge for chronological placement, since the ancient Sheikah Sage's account specifically covers the period 10,000 years past and makes no mention of any civilization other than the Sheikah themselves and the various races that provided champions for the divine beasts. If the Zonai were active participants in the events surrounding the first great calamity, their omission from official historical records would require explanation that goes beyond simple forgetfulness or natural historical decay. The systematic nature of this historical silence suggests deliberate suppression of Zonai memory, possibly as part of the same political processes that led to Sheikah exile and the burial of advanced technology throughout the kingdom. If the Zonai were associated with magical practices that the royal authorities deemed dangerous or threatening, their elimination from official records would follow the same pattern of historical revision that characterized other episodes in Hyrule's past, where inconvenient truths were systematically erased from public consciousness. The tapestry that serves as the primary visual record of the ancient battle against Calamity Ganon provides crucial evidence for understanding what information has been preserved and what may have been deliberately excluded from official historical accounts. The careful artistic program that depicts guardians, divine beasts, and the heroic figures who operated them suggests sophisticated historical documentation capabilities. Yet no trace of Zonai architectural elements or cultural symbols appears anywhere in this comprehensive visual narrative. This absence becomes particularly significant when we consider that Zonai ruins are distributed throughout the same geographical regions where the ancient battle took place, including areas that served as strategic positions for divine beast operations and guardian deployments. If the Zonai were active during this period, their architectural installations would have provided natural defensive positions and logistical support points that any competent military commander would have incorporated into strategic planning. The possibility that the Zonai disappeared entirely before the events depicted on the tapestry would resolve the contradiction of their historical absence while maintaining consistency with the archaeological evidence for their blank, sophisticated civilization. This timeline would place their cultural zenith in the distant past, potentially during the era of chaos that preceded the establishment of the unified kingdom of Hyrule, when multiple competing civilizations struggled for dominance over the land and its resources. The war between the interlopers and the forces of divine order that culminated in the banishment of the magic-wielding rebels to the Twilight Realm provides a historical framework that could encompass Zonai civilization and explain their subsequent disappearance from the historical record. If the Zonai were among the peoples who participated in this ancient conflict, either as allies of the interlopers or as independent actors caught up in the broader struggle, their fate would have been determined by the outcome of battles fought before the Kingdom of Hyrule achieved its classical form. The architectural evidence for Zonai mastery of environmental manipulation, particularly the perpetual darkness that shrouds Typhlo ruins and the sophisticated water management systems found throughout their territorial range, suggests magical capabilities that would align with the advanced sorcery attributed to the interlopers in Twilight Realm legends. Yet the protective function served by dragon guardians at sacred sites indicates spiritual orientation toward preservation rather than conquest, complicating any simple identification of Zonai culture with the rebellious forces that sought to overthrow divine authority. The geographical distribution of authentic Zonai ruins follows patterns that suggest territorial control over specific regions, rather than random settlement or temporary occupation, indicating a civilization that achieved sufficient political organization and military capability to establish and maintain defined boundaries over extended periods. The concentration of major installations in Farron Woods, with secondary sites distributed throughout other regions, points toward a hub and spoke organizational model that required sophisticated administrative capabilities and effective communication networks. The integration of astronomical observation capabilities into Zonai architectural programs, evidenced by the elevated platforms and carefully oriented sightlines found at sites like Thunder Plateau, suggests a people who maintained systematic records of celestial phenomena across extended time periods. Such observations require cultural continuity, spanning multiple generations, and imply social institutions capable of preserving and transmitting specialized knowledge through periods of political instability or environmental challenge. The mathematical relationships encoded within Zonai decorative elements demonstrate theoretical understanding that connects to universal principles governing natural growth patterns and cosmic organization, indicating intellectual achievements that typically require sustained scholarly tradition and institutional support for advanced learning. The consistency of these mathematical themes across different architectural sites suggests educational systems capable of training multiple generations of architects and artisans in complex theoretical principles. The evidence for Zonai influence on later architectural traditions, including possible connections to Sky People civilization and Sheikah technology development, implies cultural legacy that extended beyond the immediate period of their political prominence. Knowledge preservation across such extended temporal spans requires either direct cultural continuity through surviving populations or systematic documentation that allows later civilizations to reconstruct and build upon earlier achievements. The weathering patterns visible on authentic Zonai ruins provide physical evidence for their antiquity, as natural processes of erosion and biological colonization follow predictable timelines that allow approximate dating of exposed stone surfaces. The soft edges and organic growth patterns found on dragon statues and owl carvings indicate exposure to natural elements across periods measured in millennia rather than centuries, supporting theories that place Zonai civilization in the distant rather than recent past. Yet the exceptional preservation of certain architectural elements, particularly at sites like the Spring of Courage, where water flow may have created protective microclimates, demonstrates that environmental conditions can significantly affect decay rates and preservation quality. The possibility that some Zonai sites benefited from protection through magical or technological means cannot be entirely excluded, potentially complicating chronological estimates based purely on apparent weathering. The luminous stones that appear throughout regions associated with Zonai architecture may represent physical evidence of the temporal manipulation capabilities that would have allowed this civilization to influence events across extended historical periods even after their apparent disappearance from active political participation. If these mysterious objects indeed contain preserved consciousness or spiritual energy from vanished peoples, they might serve as temporal anchors that maintain Zonai influence across vast spans of time. The relationship between luminous stones and the blood moon phenomenon suggests connections to forces that operate outside normal temporal constraints, where supernatural energies can affect physical reality according to cycles that transcend ordinary cause and effect relationships. The Zonai understanding of such phenomena would have provided capabilities for influencing historical development even from positions of apparent powerlessness or exile. The seasonal variations in dragon flight patterns that bring Farosh, Dinral, and Nadra along routes that pass near major Zonai architectural sites may represent continuation of ancient relationships between this vanished civilization and spiritual forces that transcend ordinary temporal limitations. If the Zonai established spiritual contracts or alliance agreements with draconic entities during their period of active civilization, such relationships might continue to influence events in the contemporary period, despite the apparent absence of their original human partners. The astronomical alignments that appear to govern certain aspects of dragon behavior, particularly their appearance at specific times and locations that correspond to celestial events, suggest systematic knowledge of cosmic cycles that the Zonai may have encoded into spiritual practices that continue to operate automatically across extended periods. Such arrangements would allow vanished civilizations to maintain influence over later historical developments through self-executing programs embedded within natural or supernatural systems. The question of whether Zonai civilization experienced gradual decline or sudden catastrophic termination affects interpretation of their chronological position and its implications for understanding broader historical patterns in Hyrulean development. Gradual decline would suggest adaptation to changing circumstances that eventually led to cultural assimilation or transformation into other forms, while sudden termination would indicate external forces that overwhelmed their defensive capabilities and institutional resilience. The archaeological evidence suggests elements of both patterns, with some sites showing signs of abandonment and natural reclamation, while others display evidence of more dramatic disruption that interrupted normal decay processes. The variation in preservation conditions across different Zonai locations may reflect the complex historical circumstances that surrounded their ultimate disappearance from active participation in regional political development. In the gentle darkness that precedes restful sleep, we can contemplate the mysterious temporal currents that carry civilizations from emergence through flowering to transformation or dissolution, recognizing that time itself may be more fluid and complex than our ordinary experience suggests. The Zonai mystery reminds us that history is not simply linear progression, but multidimensional tapestry where past, present, and future interact according to patterns that transcend conventional chronological understanding. The stone monuments that continue their patient vigil across the landscape serve as anchors for memory that spans periods too vast for individual consciousness to comprehend. Their mathematical proportions encoding truths that remain constant even as the cultures that discovered them rise and fall like waves upon an eternal shore. In their silence lies wisdom about the relationship between temporal achievement and timeless truth, between the civilizations that appear and disappear, and the cosmic principles that remain forever beyond the reach of historical change. The relationship between the ancient Zonai civilization and the enigmatic Sheikah tribe represents one of the most complex and multifaceted mysteries in all of Hyrulean archaeology, where evidence points simultaneously toward collaboration, competition, and perhaps even common origins that have been obscured by millennia of historical revision and deliberate suppression of inconvenient truths. The proximity of Zonai ruins to Sheikah shrine locations cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. Yet the nature of this relationship defies simple categorization and challenges our understanding of how advanced civilizations interact when their technological capabilities and spiritual orientations intersect in unexpected ways. The geographical distribution of shrines throughout the kingdom follows patterns that consistently place these Sheikah installations within close proximity to major Zonai architectural sites, suggesting either remarkable prescience on the part of shrine builders who somehow anticipated where ancient ruins would be discovered, or deliberate coordination between the two civilizations during periods when both were actively engaged in construction projects across the same territorial ranges. The mathematical precision required for such coordination implies communication networks and shared planning capabilities that would have demanded unprecedented levels of cooperation between cultures whose surface characteristics appear quite different. The shrine network itself represents technological achievement on a scale that rivals or exceeds anything found in authentic Zonai construction, yet the approaches taken by each civilization towards solving similar engineering challenges demonstrate fascinating contrasts in methodology and philosophical orientation. Where Zonai architecture achieves integration with natural systems through organic flowing forms that seem to grow from the landscape itself, Sheikah construction employs geometric precision and systematic modularity that imposes mathematical order upon environmental chaos through superior technical control. Yet beneath these surface differences lie shared theoretical foundations that suggest common origins or extensive knowledge exchange during crucial developmental periods. The spiral motifs that appear throughout both architectural traditions incorporate identical mathematical relationships, their proportions following the same cosmic harmonies that govern natural growth patterns from the cellular level to galactic structures. The consistency of these mathematical themes across different building techniques and materials indicates either parallel discovery of universal principles or direct transmission of specialized knowledge between cultures that understood the fundamental importance of sacred geometry. The three-way division that characterized Sheikah civilization following the Great Calamity provides a framework for understanding how advanced technological cultures can fragment under pressure, with different factions choosing radically different approaches to preserving their essential knowledge and capabilities during periods of political persecution and social upheaval. The loyal Sheikah who accepted royal authority and abandoned their most powerful technologies represent one possible response to such pressures, while the Yiga clan demonstrates the alternative path of active resistance and alliance with forces opposed to existing political structures. The possibility that a third faction existed, one that chose neither complete submission nor open rebellion, but rather withdrawal into secrecy, where their knowledge could be preserved and developed without direct interference from political authorities, opens intriguing possibilities for understanding the relationship between Sheikah technology and Zonai architectural achievements. This theoretical third branch might have operated under the name Zonai as a form of protective camouflage, allowing them to continue their researches while avoiding the political complications that destroyed their more visible cousins. Such an arrangement would explain the sophisticated integration of Sheikah shrine technology with Zonai architectural sites, as both building traditions would represent different aspects of the same underlying technological and spiritual knowledge base, adapted to serve different functions within a coordinated program of landscape modification and consciousness development. The shrines would serve as intensive training facilities for individual heroes, while the larger Zonai installations would function as centers for community spiritual practice and astronomical observation. The name Zonai itself, with its etymological connection to the concept of mystery, suggests deliberate adoption of an identity designed to conceal rather than reveal the true nature and origins of this enigmatic culture. Rather than representing an authentic tribal designation, Zonai might have functioned as a code word that allowed initiated members to recognize each other while maintaining operational security in environments where their activities required protection from hostile political forces. The architectural evidence supports this interpretation, as the Lomai labyrinths demonstrate clear fusion of Zonai decorative elements with Sheikah construction techniques, their massive scale and geometric precision far exceeding anything found at authentic Zonai sites. While incorporating dragon heads and serpent motifs that clearly reference the jungle civilization's symbolic vocabulary, these structures appear designed specifically to house Sheikah shrines within environments that honor Zonai aesthetic traditions, suggesting collaborative effort between cultures that shared common goals despite maintaining distinct surface identities. The barbarian armor housed within these labyrinths provides another crucial piece of evidence for understanding the true relationship between these civilizations, as its technological sophistication and psychological enhancement capabilities suggest. Manufacturing techniques that combine Sheikah knowledge of consciousness, manipulation, with Zonai understanding of warrior culture and battlefield psychology. The armor's ability to enhance fighting spirit through visual programming represents exactly the kind of interdisciplinary achievement that would result from collaboration between cultures with complementary areas of expertise. The timing of this collaboration becomes clearer when we consider the evidence from the Pharaon Tower, where Sheikah technology appears to have been deliberately installed in ways that would not interfere with existing Zonai construction until the moment of activation 10,000 years later. This suggests advanced planning that spanned multiple generations and required detailed knowledge of both civilizations' long-term strategic objectives and technological capabilities. The integration of water management systems throughout both Sheikah and Zonai installations demonstrates another area where collaborative effort produced results superior to what either culture might have achieved working independently. The Spring of Courage exemplifies this integration, where natural water flow has been channeled through carved conduits that serve both the practical function of shrine cooling systems and the spiritual purpose of creating acoustic environments that facilitate meditative states and consciousness expansion. The perpetual darkness that shrouds Typhlo ruins represents perhaps the most compelling evidence for Sheikah involvement in Zonai construction projects, as the environmental manipulation required to create stable darkness in outdoor settings would demand technological capabilities far beyond anything demonstrated at other Zonai sites. Yet the bird torches that provide guidance through this artificial night incorporate authentic Zonai bird imagery, suggesting collaboration between cultures that combined Sheikah environmental control technology with Zonai symbolic programs and aesthetic sensibilities. The mathematical relationships encoded within Zonai spiral decorations correspond precisely to the harmonic frequencies that power Sheikah technology, indicating either remarkable coincidence or deliberate design coordination that allowed both systems to operate synergistically within shared environments. The tick marks that terminate Zonai spirals may serve as tuning indicators that allowed Sheikah technicians to calibrate their equipment according to energy patterns established by existing Zonai installations. The observatory beneath Hyrule Castle, where the final confrontation between Link and Calamity Ganon takes place, incorporates architectural elements that clearly reference both traditions while serving functions that require integration of their respective technological capabilities. The star charts and astronomical calculations that cover the walls represent knowledge that would have required sustained observation across multiple generations, while the mechanical systems that control the chamber's configuration demonstrate Sheikah engineering adapted to work within spaces designed according to Zonai architectural principles. The ancient robots that continue to operate throughout Lanayru Desert provide another example of technological integration that spans multiple cultural traditions. Their spiral decorations clearly referencing Zonai symbolic vocabulary, while their operational principles demonstrate Sheikah understanding of consciousness transfer and autonomous system management. These mechanical beings may represent the earliest successful fusion of Sheikah technology with design principles derived from Zonai architectural traditions. The time stones scattered throughout the desert regions create temporal manipulation effects that would have provided ideal conditions for collaborative research between cultures whose different approaches to understanding reality could benefit from controlled experimentation in environments where cause and effect relationships could be systematically modified. The ability to restore ancient mechanisms to full functionality would have allowed Sheikah technicians to study Zonai construction techniques under optimal conditions. The Wind Tribe's ascension to aerial realms may represent the ultimate expression of successful collaboration between technological and mystical approaches to transcending ordinary physical limitations, where Sheikah engineering capabilities were combined with Zonai spiritual wisdom to achieve forms of existence that neither culture could have attained independently. The Dominion rod that serves as their primary technological interface incorporates mathematical proportions found in both architectural traditions, while serving functions that require integration of mechanical and consciousness-based control systems. The Shadow Temple's existence as a facility for torture and interrogation suggests that the royal family of Hyrule possessed detailed knowledge of Sheikah, capabilities for manipulating consciousness and extracting information through psychological techniques that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. If a secretive third branch of Sheikah civilization did exist under the Zonai designation, the Shadow Temple would have served as the primary facility for eliminating any members whose loyalty became questionable. The systematic suppression of dangerous knowledge that characterizes so much of Hyrulean political history provides context for understanding why evidence of Sheikah-Zonai collaboration would have been carefully eliminated from official records. As such, cooperation would have represented exactly the kind of concentrated, magical and technological capability that royal authorities feared could challenge their monopoly on legitimate power. The very thoroughness of historical erasure surrounding Zonai civilization suggests threats that exceeded normal political competition. The burial grounds that may be represented by the stone pillars scattered throughout Gucci Plains provide physical evidence for the fate of individuals who possessed knowledge deemed too dangerous for preservation. Their graves, marked by monuments that incorporated Zonai symbolic vocabulary, while serving the practical function of ensuring that dangerous information died with its possessors. The proximity of these burial sites to Farron Woods suggests systematic elimination of populations that lived within the primary Zonai cultural region. The Yiga clan's continued existence as an organization dedicated to opposing royal authority demonstrates that complete suppression of Sheikah resistance proved impossible despite extraordinary efforts to eliminate all traces of rebellious sentiment from the surviving population. If a Zonai faction did exist as a third branch of Sheikah civilization, its members would have faced even more severe persecution as practitioners of both technological and mystical traditions that posed multiple forms of threat to established political order. The clan's adoption of banana cultivation as their primary agricultural activity may represent preservation of specialized knowledge about tropical ecosystems and their management, techniques that would have been essential for maintaining the jungle installations where authentic Zonai construction achieved its most sophisticated expressions. The ability to create self-sustaining communities in challenging environments would have provided crucial capabilities for any group attempting to maintain independence from centralized political control. The ancient sea chart that appears in Skyward Sword incorporates spiral patterns identical to those found in authentic Zonai architecture, suggesting that knowledge of these mathematical relationships predates the establishment of any known civilization and may represent universal principles that different cultures have discovered independently across vast periods of B's historical development. The consistency of these patterns across multiple games implies either remarkable coincidence or underlying narrative connections that span the entire series timeline. The integration of Korok puzzles with Zonai symbolic vocabulary suggests that forest spirits possess detailed knowledge of the mathematical principles that governed both civilizations' approaches to environmental modification and consciousness development. The Korok's role as hidden guides for heroic development indicates their function as preservers of ancient wisdom that continues to serve beneficial purposes despite the disappearance of the original cultures that discovered such preservers' knowledge. The Great Deku Tree's relationship with the Master Sword and his knowledge of events spanning multiple historical periods indicates access to information networks that transcend ordinary temporal and spatial limitations. suggesting possible connections to the same mystical technologies that allowed Zonai civilization to create effects like the perpetual darkness at Typhlo ruins. The tree's protective function may extend to preserving knowledge that would otherwise be lost when the civilizations that created it face persecution or natural disaster. The luminous stones that appear throughout regions associated with both civilizations may represent a form of technological inheritance that allows later peoples to benefit from ancient achievements, even when direct cultural continuity has long been broken through historical catastrophe or political suppression. The stone's connection to spiritual energy and their response to supernatural phenomena suggests storage and transmission capabilities that operate according to principles that neither purely technological nor purely mystical approaches could achieve independently. The blood moon phenomenon that periodically restores defeated enemies throughout the kingdom may represent activation of ancient systems that were designed to maintain balance between opposing forces, their operation continuing automatically across vast periods, despite the disappearance of the civilizations that originally established such mechanisms. The connection between blood moon energy and luminous stone emanations suggests common technological foundations that span multiple aspects of the supernatural phenomena that characterize contemporary Hyrule. In the gentle darkness that precedes restful sleep, we can contemplate the complex relationships that bind together apparently separate civilizations, recognizing that collaboration and competition often interweave in patterns too subtle for surface observation to detect. The Sheikah and Zonai mysteries remind us that knowledge preservation requires not only technical capability, but also wisdom about when concealment serves truth better than revelation, when the appearance of separation protects essential unity from forces that would destroy what they cannot understand or control. The mathematical harmonies that connect spiral decorations to cosmic principles, the integration of natural and artificial systems that characterizes the most sophisticated ancient constructions, suggest that true collaboration transcends the boundaries between cultures to encompass partnership with the fundamental forces that organize reality at its deepest levels. In their stone monuments and technological marvels lies teaching about the relationship between individual achievement and collective wisdom, between the civilizations that appear to rise and fall independently, and the underlying currents of knowledge that flow beneath all surface changes. Throughout the verdant landscapes of contemporary Hyrule, scattered like seeds carried on ancient winds and taking root in soil enriched by the passage of countless generations, live communities whose daily customs and cultural traditions may preserve echoes of the vanished Zonai civilization in forms so subtle and integrated that even their own inhabitants remain unaware of the profound historical connections that flow through their blood and shape their understanding of the world around them. These potential descendants and cultural inheritors represent living bridges between the mysterious past and the vibrant present, their very existence suggesting that civilizations never truly disappear but transform and adapt, weaving themselves into the fabric of later cultures in ways that ensure their essential wisdom survives, even when their political structures and formal institutions crumble into dust. The fishing village of Lurelin, nestled along the southeastern coast where the jungle meets the endless expanse of ocean, presents perhaps the most compelling evidence for direct cultural continuity between ancient Zonai civilization and contemporary Hyrulean communities. The village's location places it within easy walking distance of major Zonai architectural sites, close enough that the inhabitants could have maintained contact with jungle installations throughout periods when these mysterious structures still functioned as active centers of spiritual and technological activity rather than silent ruins slowly surrendering to the patient work of wind and weather. The architectural elements that characterize Lurlin's unique building tradition incorporate design motifs that directly reference authentic Zonai symbolic vocabulary, particularly the spiral patterns that appear throughout the village's most distinctive constructions. The larger boats that serve as foundations for several residential structures display the same hooked spiral design found on dragon statues and owl carvings throughout Ferren Woods, their proportions following mathematical relationships that encode cosmic harmonies within apparently decorative elements that serve multiple, practical, and spiritual functions simultaneously. The craftsmanship evident in these boat conversions demonstrates sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles that allow curved hulls designed for water navigation to serve as stable foundations for permanent, land-based construction, indicating technical knowledge that spans multiple specialized domains and suggests cultural traditions that have preserved and transmitted complex practical skills across extended periods. The integration of maritime and terrestrial architectural approaches reflects the same holistic methodology that characterizes authentic Zonai construction techniques. The village's intimate knowledge of local geography and natural resources, particularly their understanding of seasonal patterns that affect fishing conditions and agricultural productivity, suggests inheritance of ecological wisdom that would have required generations of careful observation and systematic knowledge preservation to accumulate and refine. Such environmental expertise typically develops within stable cultural communities, whose institutional continuity allows specialized knowledge to pass from teacher to student across multiple generations without significant loss or distortion. The presence of Rosal, a villager who demonstrates the ability to decipher ancient inscriptions carved into the mysterious monument at Palmerae ruins, provides direct evidence for cultural transmission that preserved linguistic knowledge connecting contemporary Lurelin inhabitants to the vanished civilization responsible for creating that enigmatic structure. The fact that such specialized interpretive capabilities exist within the village suggests educational traditions that maintained contact with ancient symbolic systems despite the apparent disappearance of the cultures that originally developed them. The monument itself, with its distinctive shape that echoes certain aspects of the Mirror of Twilight while incorporating architectural elements clearly associated with Zonai construction techniques, represents exactly the kind of cultural synthesis that would result if surviving members of the ancient civilization adapted their traditional knowledge to serve new functions within changed historical circumstances. The ability to decode its inscriptions implies preservation of interpretive keys that would have been lost if cultural continuity had been completely severed. The villagers' maritime lifestyle connects them to the same oceanic trading networks that may have originally brought Zonai ancestors from their hypothetical desert homeland to the jungle regions where their architectural legacy achieved its most sophisticated expression. The knowledge required for successful deep water fishing and coastal navigation represents cultural capital that accumulates slowly across generations and typically survives political upheavals that might destroy more formal, institutional structures while leaving practical survival skills intact within family and community traditions. The village's integration with the natural environment, where human construction works in harmony with existing ecological systems rather than imposing artificial order upon natural processes, reflects the same philosophical orientation that characterizes authentic Zonai architecture at sites like the Spring of Courage. This approach to development requires understanding of environmental principles that extends far beyond immediate practical concerns to encompass long-term sustainability and spiritual relationship with the living systems that support human communities. The tropical plant species that flourish throughout the regions associated with both Lurelin village and major Zonai architectural sites create botanical environments that would have supported similar lifestyles and agricultural practices across extended historical periods, suggesting ecological continuity that could have facilitated cultural preservation even during times of political disruption or social transformation. The knowledge required for successful cultivation and utilization of tropical species represents specialized expertise that typically develops within stable communities, whose cultural traditions span multiple generations. The Koroks who appear throughout the forested regions of Hyrule may represent another form of cultural continuity that connects contemporary spiritual practices to ancient wisdom traditions that originated with civilizations whose formal, political structures have long since disappeared from the Pots's historical record. These forest spirits demonstrate detailed knowledge of the mathematical principles that govern both natural growth patterns and the symbolic programs embedded within human architectural achievements, suggesting access to information that transcends ordinary temporal limitations. The block puzzles that serve as Korok trials incorporate the same spiral motifs found throughout authentic Zonai architecture, their solutions requiring understanding of spatial relationships and geometric principles that echo the mathematical sophistication found in dragon carvings and observatory platforms scattered throughout the ancient ruins. The consistency of these design elements across both spiritual and material domains suggests underlying knowledge systems that connect natural and artificial forms of organization according to universal principles. The Koroks' role as hidden guides for heroic development indicates their function as preservers and transmitters of wisdom that serves beneficial purposes. Despite the disappearance of the original civilizations that may have discovered or codified such knowledge, their ability to recognize and reward proper understanding of symbolic relationships suggests institutional continuity that operates according to different principles than ordinary political or cultural structures, preserving essential teachings through spiritual rather than material transmission mechanisms. The relationship between Korok locations and shrine placement follows patterns that mirror the proximity between Zonai ruins and Sheikah installations, suggesting that forest spirits served as intermediaries who facilitated cooperation between different advanced civilizations while maintaining their own independent spiritual agenda that transcended the immediate political concerns of any particular cultural group. This intermediary function would have provided crucial stability during periods of social upheaval or cultural transformation. The Great Deku Tree's vast knowledge of historical events spanning multiple eras and his protective relationship with sacred artifacts like the Master Sword indicate access to information networks that operate outside normal temporal constraints, suggesting possible connections to the same mystical technologies that allowed Zonai civilization to create environmental effects like the perpetual darkness at Typhlo ruins. His role as keeper of forest wisdom may encompass preservation of knowledge that originated with human civilizations whose formal structures have disappeared. The Kokiri who preceded the Koroks in earlier eras of forest history demonstrated similar connections to ancient symbolic systems, their tribal emblem incorporating the same spiral design with tick marks that characterizes authentic Zonai decorative vocabulary. The spiritual stone of the forest that served as their sacred treasure encoded these same mathematical relationships within crystalline structures that could preserve and transmit harmonic information across vast periods without degradation or distortion. The evolutionary transformation from human-appearing Kokiri to plant-like Koroks may represent adaptation to environmental changes that required forest spirits to assume forms better suited for long-term survival in Kokiri ecosystems that had been altered by the magical or technological activities of vanished civilizations, the preservation of essential knowledge and spiritual functions despite radical physical transformation suggests institutional resilience that operates according to principles that transcend particular material forms. The connection between forest spirits and the eternal cycles of death and rebirth that characterize natural ecosystems provides a model for understanding how cultural wisdom might survive the apparent disappearance of the civilizations that originally developed such knowledge. Their essential teachings preserved within spiritual traditions that continue to operate even when their original human contexts no longer exist. This form of cultural inheritance operates according to different principles than genealogical descent, but may prove more durable across extended historical periods. The Gerudo people, despite their geographical separation from the primary regions associated with Zonai civilization, demonstrate cultural elements that suggest possible historical connections or parallel development of similar spiritual and technological traditions. Their mastery of desert survival techniques and their sophisticated understanding of architectural principles that allow permanent settlement in harsh environments reflect the same integration of practical and mystical knowledge that alone characterizes the most advanced ancient civilizations. The Gerudo's matriarchal social organization and their emphasis on warrior culture echo themes that appear throughout the limited information available about Zonai civilization, particularly the descriptions of barbarian armor that enhanced fighting spirit and the evidence for a people who had made warfare a central organizing principle of their entire cultural identity. The preservation of such cultural orientations across vast geographical and temporal distances suggests either common origins or extensive cultural exchange during crucial developmental periods. The lightning magic that represents the most distinctive aspect of Gerudo spiritual traditions connects them to the same elemental forces that the living dragons embody in their roles as guardians and teachers, suggesting participation in mystical systems that may have originated with the ancient civilizations responsible for carving dragon statues at sacred sites throughout the kingdom. The ability to call down divine judgment through electrical manifestation implies understanding of cosmic principles that transcends ordinary natural philosophy. The Goron people, with their exceptional longevity and their cultural emphasis on craftsmanship and geological expertise, represent another potential repository for knowledge that may have originated with ancient civilizations whose formal structures have disappeared from the historical record. Their intimate understanding of volcanic processes and mineral formation suggests theoretical knowledge that typically requires sustained scholarly tradition and institutional support for advanced learning across multiple generations. The Goron integration with Death Mountain's harsh environment demonstrates the same holistic approach to working with, rather than against, natural forces that characterizes authentic Zonai architecture, where human construction serves as extension and enhancement of existing geological processes, rather than imposition of artificial order upon natural systems. This philosophical orientation requires understanding that extends far beyond immediate practical concerns to encompass spiritual relationship with the living forces that shape physical reality. The Zora's exceptional longevity provides them with institutional memory that spans periods too vast for shorter-lived races to comprehend through direct experience, making them natural preservers of historical knowledge that might otherwise be lost during periods of social upheaval or cultural transformation. Their role as chroniclers and historians connects them to the same functions that would have been essential for preserving the technical and spiritual knowledge that characterized advanced ancient civilizations. The Zora's mastery of aquatic environments and their sophisticated understanding of hydrological principles echo the water management systems that appear throughout authentic Zonai sites, particularly the Spring of Courage, where natural flow has been channeled through carved conduits that serve both practical and spiritual functions. This shared expertise suggests either cultural exchange or parallel development of similar approaches to working with water as both physical resource and spiritual medium. The Rito people, despite their relatively recent evolutionary development from the Zora, demonstrate cultural characteristics that suggest inheritance of ancient aerial traditions that may connect to the Sky people and their advanced understanding of atmospheric manipulation and consciousness transfer technologies. Their role as messengers and scouts requires navigational knowledge and environmental awareness that builds upon theoretical foundations that may extend back to the earliest periods of Hyrulean civilization. The Rito's musical traditions and their sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles connect them to the same harmonic knowledge that appears embedded within Zonai architectural programs, where mathematical relationships governing sound and resonance served both aesthetic and functional purposes within integrated environmental systems. The preservation of such specialized knowledge across major biological transformation suggests cultural continuity that operates according to principles that transcend particular physical forms. The scattered communities that dot the landscape throughout contemporary Hyrule demonstrate remarkable diversity in their approaches to architecture, agriculture, and social organization, yet common threads appear again and again that suggest shared cultural foundations that may extend back to the earliest periods of regional development. The stability houses that provide shelter for travelers incorporate design elements that reference multiple architectural traditions while serving practical functions that require sophisticated understanding of materials and construction technique. The trading networks that connect these diverse communities create information exchange systems that preserve and transmit cultural knowledge across geographical barriers that might otherwise prevent contact between groups whose immediate survival needs require different environmental adaptations. The merchants and travelers who maintain these networks serve as carriers for traditional knowledge that might otherwise remain isolated within particular communities, facilitating cultural synthesis that enriches all participants. The religious observances that continue throughout contemporary Hyrule, particularly the reverence shown toward goddess statues and the maintenance of sacred sites that may have originated with vanished civilizations, suggests spiritual continuity that preserves essential teachings even when their original institutional contexts have disappeared. The ability of these ancient sites to continue serving beneficial functions for contemporary worshippers indicates that their spiritual programming operates according to principles that transcend particular cultural forms. The seasonal festivals and community celebrations that mark important transitions throughout the agricultural year preserve cultural wisdom about the relationship between human communities and natural cycles, knowledge that typically accumulates slowly across multiple generations and represents collective understanding that no individual could develop independently. These traditions serve as repositories for practical and spiritual wisdom that has proven its value through sustained application across extended historical periods. In the gentle darkness that precedes restful sleep, we can contemplate the quiet streams of cultural continuity that flow beneath the apparent changes and disruptions that mark the surface of historical development, recognizing that wisdom never truly disappears, but finds new forms and new voices to carry its essential teachings forward into each new generation. The descendants and survivors who walk the paths of contemporary Hyrule carry within their daily customs and inherited traditions the living legacy of civilizations whose formal structures may have crumbled but whose deepest insights continue to guide and nurture those who have learned to recognize their subtle presence. The spiral symbols that appear in fishing nets and architectural ornaments, the mathematical relationships that govern traditional crafts and seasonal celebrations, the environmental knowledge that allows communities to flourish in harmony with the living systems that support all existence. These represent forms of cultural inheritance that prove more durable than political institutions or military conquests. In their preservation across vast spans of time and profound historical transformation lies testament to the resilience of human wisdom and the eternal capacity of consciousness to adapt, preserve, and transmit the insights that make life meaningful and beautiful. And so we reach the end of our journey through the labyrinth of Zonai mysteries. Though like the ancient spirals carved in their stone, every ending is also a beginning. These theories may never find complete resolution, and perhaps that is as it should be. The beauty of mystery lies not always in its solution, but in the questions it inspires, the wonder it awakens, and the paths of exploration it opens before curious minds seeking to understand the deeper patterns that connect past, present, and future in ways that transcend ordinary historical understanding. We have wandered together through ruins that speak in languages of stone and symbol, where dragon guardians maintain their eternal vigil over sacred springs and owl sentinels watch with carved eyes that seem to hold wisdom accumulated across millennia. We have contemplated the mathematical precision of spiral patterns that encode cosmic harmonies within decorative elements, and traced the possible journeys of a civilization that may have traveled from desert technology to jungle mysticism, from earthbound achievement to transcendent wisdom that operates beyond the reach of conventional archaeological investigation. The theories we have explored span vast reaches of time and possibility, connecting the mysterious Zonai to everything from the dark interlopers banished to twilight realms to the sky people who chose transcendence over earthbound limitation. We have seen how civilizations might fragment under pressure, some factions choosing collaboration with established authority, while others embrace rebellion or withdrawal into secrecy, where dangerous knowledge can be preserved away from political interference and systematic suppression. Perhaps the Zonai were indeed the savage tribe described in ancient texts, warriors whose entire culture centered around conflict and the enhancement of fighting spirit through magical techniques embedded within their very clothing and architectural environments. Perhaps they were peaceful astronomers and environmental engineers whose sophisticated understanding of natural systems allowed them to create effects that seem magical to contemporary observers, but operated according to principles that a bound, truly advanced civilization might master through patient study and application. Or perhaps they were something more complex still, a people who encompassed both aspects simultaneously, whose warrior culture served not conquest, but protection of sacred knowledge, whose apparent barbarism concealed philosophical sophistication that connected individual achievement to cosmic purpose in ways that transcended the apparent contradiction between power and wisdom, between the needs of survival and the aspirations of consciousness, seeking to understand its place within the vast unfolding of universal principles. The connections we have traced across multiple games and historical periods suggest that mystery itself may be more than mere absence of information, but a positive force that preserves essential truths by protecting them from premature interpretation or misuse by those not yet prepared to understand their full implications. The systematic erasure of Zonai culture from official historical records may represent not simple political suppression, but conscious choice by wise guardians who recognize that certain knowledge requires proper preparation and spiritual development before it can be safely transmitted. In this interpretation, the ruins themselves serve as testing grounds and teaching devices. They're symbolic programs designed to reveal their secrets gradually to those who approach with proper reverence and understanding, while remaining opaque to casual observers or those who seek power without wisdom. The dragon guardians at sacred springs, the owl sentinels watching from carved perches, the spiral patterns that encode mathematical relationships connecting individual consciousness to cosmic order, all function as elements within educational systems that operate across vast spans of time. The luminous stones that glow with mysterious energy throughout regions associated with Zonai architecture may indeed contain preserved consciousness from this vanished civilization, their blue-green radiance serving as beacons for those who have developed the sensitivity necessary to receive teachings that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The blood moon phenomenon that periodically surges through the kingdom may represent scheduled activation of these teaching systems, moments when the boundary between past and present becomes permeable, and ancient wisdom can flow more freely into contemporary consciousness. The living dragons who trace their eternal paths across the skies of Hyrule, following routes that bring them near the most significant Zonai architectural sites during specific astronomical conditions, may serve as continuing embodiments of the same spiritual principles that motivated the ancient civilization to carve their stone guardians and encode their mathematical insights within decorative programs that reward contemplation with ever deeper levels of understanding. Their elemental associations with fire, ice, and electricity correspond to the transformative, preserving, and illuminating aspects of consciousness development that any genuine educational system must address. The forest spirits who continue to offer guidance and testing for heroic development may represent another form of institutional continuity that connects contemporary spiritual seekers to wisdom traditions that originated with civilizations whose political structures have long since crumbled into dust. The Korok's cheerful demeanor and playful approach to serious spiritual work suggest understanding that true teaching often operates through joy and discovery rather than solemn instruction or rigid adherence to formal doctrine. The communities that dot contemporary Hyrule, with their diverse approaches to architecture, agriculture, and social organization, demonstrate the living legacy of cultural streams that may have originated with the ancient Zonai, but have adapted and evolved to serve the needs of later generations. The spiral motifs that appear in fishing nets and boat decorations, the environmental knowledge that allows harmonious integration with natural systems, the seasonal celebrations that mark important transitions throughout the agricultural year, all represent forms of cultural inheritance that prove more durable than political institutions or military conquests. The very fact that we can contemplate these mysteries with wonder rather than fear, that the ruins inspire curiosity rather than dread, suggests that whatever tragedies may have befallen the Zonai civilization, their essential spirit survived to influence later developments in positive rather than destructive ways. The dragon guardians radiate protective rather than threatening energy, their carved features conveying wisdom and benevolence that transcends the circumstances of their creation or the fate of their creators. In the gentle darkness that surrounds us now, as consciousness prepares for the daily journey into dream realms where different laws operate and impossible things become natural, we can appreciate mystery for its own sake, rather than seeking always to dispel it through premature explanation. The questions raised by Zonai ruins may be more valuable than any definitive answers we might discover, their symbolic programs more important for the consciousness they awaken than for the specific information they encode. The mathematical relationships that govern spiral decorations, connecting ancient stone carvings to the growth patterns of flowers and the structure of galaxies, remind us that beauty itself serves as bridge between individual perception and universal truth. The dragon heads that emerge from living rock to guard sacred springs, the owl motifs that watch with patient eyes that seem to hold eternity within their carved depths, speak to dimensions of existence that transcend the apparent solidity of material reality. Perhaps in sleep, when ordinary consciousness releases its grip on familiar patterns and allows awareness to drift into realms where time flows differently and space responds to intention rather than physical law, we can walk among the Zonai themselves and understand directly what no amount of archaeological investigation or theoretical speculation could reveal. Perhaps in dreams we can witness their construction techniques, comprehend their symbolic systems, and know at last whether they were conquered by external enemies, transformed by internal evolution, or simply chose to withdraw into dimensions of existence that remain accessible to consciousness but invisible to historical investigation. The spiral symbols that mark so many surfaces throughout their ruins may represent not merely decorative elements, but maps of consciousness development itself, their mathematical precision encoding the pathways by which individual awareness can expand to encompass universal principles that connect personal experience to cosmic purpose. The tick marks that terminate these spirals may indicate specific moments in the expansion process, where qualitative transformation becomes possible through accumulated insight and spiritual preparation. Let these ancient mysteries accompany you now as awareness settles into the rhythm of deeper rest, their unanswered questions serving not as frustrations, but as gentle currents that carry consciousness toward realms where mystery resolves, not through explanation, but through direct participation in the very forces that create and maintain the endless dance of existence. In sleep, perhaps, the true Zonai legacy lives on not as historical curiosity, but as living wisdom that continues to guide and inspire those who have learned to listen with more than ordinary attention. The stone dragons keep their vigil, the mathematical spirals encode their cosmic truths, and somewhere in the mists of dream and memory, the ancient civilization continues its patient teaching. For those who approach their ruins, not as conquerors seeking to extract secrets, but as students ready to receive whatever wisdom the stones are willing to share. Rest now, dreamer, and let the eternal mysteries cradle you in their spiraling embrace, knowing that some truths are too beautiful and too profound to be contained within the narrow boundaries of definitive explanation.